It was a typical morning at Los Angeles International Airport, bustling, hurried, with the constant hum of travelers rushing to their gates. But for Elon Musk, it was just another business trip, another flight to a meeting, another notch in his schedule that was always brimming with work and new ventures. He made his way to the first-class lounge, his mind already thinking about the next big idea, the next leap for humanity. But today was about to unfold in a way he could never have predicted. Elon boarded the flight to San Francisco, a routine trip to check in on one of his many companies. The plane, a luxurious private jet designed for the elite, was spacious and serene, with the soft hum of engines in the background. The crew greeted him with smiles, offering him drinks and snacks, while Elon settled into his plush seat in the front cabin. He was already deep in thought, scrolling through emails, responding to investors, and making notes on upcoming projects. But something was different about this flight. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. The flight attendants had begun to offer the usual amenities: gourmet meals, personal entertainment systems, and even special headphones to block out the noise of the outside world. But as the flight took off, the serenity in the air began to shift. A few rows behind Elon, a man stood up, his movements sharp, almost mechanical. He was tall, in his early 40s, with a neatly combed hairstyle that spoke of precision and control. His uniform, the pilot's uniform, made it clear who he was. But it wasn't the uniform that caught Elon's attention. It was the look in the pilot's eyes. It was something Elon had seen before, but never quite like this. Raw, seething, barely contained anger. For a moment, Elon thought he might have imagined it. After all, he was used to all sorts of characters in his line of work. Ambitious, competitive, passionate, sometimes even a little erratic. But this felt different. The man's gaze was fixed directly on him, and for an instant, the air felt thick with tension. The pilot approached, and the soft clinking of glasses and low hum of conversation in the cabin suddenly felt distant. Elon straightened in his seat, his eyes narrowing as he watched the man approach. What was going on? Was this some kind of joke? But there was nothing humorous about the situation. The pilot, now standing directly in front of Elon, spoke in a low, deliberate voice. "You don't know who I am, do you, Mr. Musk?" Elon blinked, momentarily taken aback by the intensity of the words. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Elon replied, his voice calm, measured. He had dealt with countless people over the years, some with odd behavior or strange comments. He wasn't about to let one man throw him off balance. The pilot's eyes burned with frustration. "You don't recognize me because you've never bothered to look. You don't care about people like me, people whose lives you've ruined with your tech, your companies, your empire." There it was. A glimmer of recognition sparked in Elon's mind, but it was fleeting. The words didn't fully land yet, but the gravity of the situation was starting to settle in. He remained calm, though there was a subtle shift in his posture, a slight tension in his shoulders. The passengers around them had begun to notice the exchange, some even beginning to whisper. Elon, however, kept his eyes locked on the pilot. He had dealt with confrontations before, in business and life, but this felt different. It was personal, and it was dangerous. "You think you can just walk into people's lives and change everything without any consequences," the pilot continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "You've taken everything from people like me. You've made millions, billions, while we're left to clean up the messes you create." Elon took a deep breath, letting the tension roll off his shoulders. He wasn't the type to panic easily. He had faced crises on a much larger scale, and now, sitting in the plush confines of a private jet, he was facing something far more personal. He couldn't help but wonder how this man had come to be here, in this moment, on this flight. "Look," Elon said slowly, his voice unwavering, "I'm not sure what you think I've done to you, but I'm here to help. Whatever you're feeling right now, we can talk about it." He gestured to the empty seats around them. "Let's sit down and figure this out." The pilot's eyes flared with fury. "Talk about it? You think I want to talk?" His hand moved to his belt, where a hidden knife gleamed under the cabin lights. "I've got nothing to lose. You don't deserve a peaceful conversation." Elon's pulse quickened, but he maintained his composure. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. It was a direct threat. The other passengers were frozen, unsure of what to do or how to react. But Elon's mind was already working, calculating his options. He couldn't let this escalate further. Not here. Not now. Listen, Elon said again, his voice soft but firm. If you think attacking me will solve anything, you're wrong. I understand pain. I understand frustration. But this violence? It doesn't help. It only makes things worse for everyone. For a split second, there was hesitation in the pilot's eyes. But it was fleeting. The knife was raised higher. That's when the first-class flight attendants moved into action, cautiously but with precision, their training kicking in. One of them, a woman in her 30s with an air of authority, stepped forward and calmly addressed the pilot. "Sir, please," she said, her voice steady. "Let's not do anything you'll regret. We can help you. You don't need to do this." But the pilot's focus remained solely on Elon, as if he hadn't even heard her. The tension in the cabin was unbearable. It felt as though time had slowed, each second stretching longer than the last. Elon could feel his heartbeat in his chest, but he knew he had to remain calm. For now, he had to show the world that the strength of a leader wasn't just in his innovations, but in his ability to face even the most unexpected threats with resolve. In that moment, with the threat of violence hanging over them all, Elon Musk faced something he never expected: an attack in first class. What he didn't know yet was that the course of this flight was about to change, not because of the danger looming in the air, but because of a choice that would surprise everyone: forgiveness. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the flight attendants worked to de-escalate the situation, Elon Musk remained frozen in the moment, his mind spinning. What was happening? What did this man want from him? The knife was still visible, held firmly by the pilot, but for a brief second, the world seemed to stop around him. The hum of the airplane engines, the soft whispers of the other passengers, and even the steady breathing of those near him all faded into the background. It was just him and the pilot, locked in this strange moment. Elon's gaze shifted briefly to the window beside him, the landscape outside a blur of clouds. He could feel the turbulence in the air, both literal and emotional. The flight had been smooth just minutes ago, but now, it felt like the world had turned upside down. His life, which was usually dictated by technology, deadlines, and innovation, now hinged on this encounter. This unexpected threat from a stranger who, for some reason, felt wronged by him. Despite the tension in the cabin, Elon's mind began to retreat into itself, as it often did when faced with extreme pressure. It wasn't fear that consumed him. It was the weight of the moment. He had faced countless challenges in his life: rocket failures, business setbacks, even personal hardships. But none of it had prepared him for this moment. This wasn't a product of his work or the hurdles of running SpaceX, Tesla, or any of his other ventures. No, this was personal. He took a deep breath, trying to center himself. There was no use in allowing panic to take control. In fact, this was precisely when his calm, collected demeanor would be most useful. "Let's try to figure this out," Elon said again, his voice steady and unwavering. "I can't imagine what you've been through to get to this point, but I promise you, violence isn't the answer." The pilot's eyes flared once more, but it was clear that there was some level of inner turmoil. The fight inside him was evident. Musk had been in high-stakes meetings before, with billion-dollar decisions hanging on every word. But those situations, though intense, always involved a professional facade. This was different. There were no press conferences, no public image to maintain. This was raw, a man reaching out in anger, in desperation. The passengers around them remained silent, almost as if they were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Some tried to hide their fear, glancing around nervously, but most seemed unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it entirely. In that moment, Elon's ability to lead became more apparent than ever. He wasn't just a tech visionary. He was someone who could inspire calm in the face of chaos. But what brought him here? What had caused this seemingly unprovoked attack? As his mind raced through the possibilities, flashes of his past began to emerge. Elon had always known that his rise to success wouldn't come without its fair share of critics. From the early days of PayPal to his work at Tesla and SpaceX, there had always been people who doubted him, who questioned his decisions. But this was different. He couldn't help but think about the countless individuals who felt left behind by the very technologies he was creating. Could this man, Jack Turner, the pilot who now stood before him, be one of those people? Elon's thoughts turned inward, to a time in his life when he too had faced overwhelming odds. He thought back to his childhood, the years spent growing up in South Africa, struggling with self-esteem and trying to fit in. He wasn't the smartest, nor the most athletic. What he had was curiosity, and that curiosity drove him to push beyond what others thought was possible. But it was also what set him apart, and sometimes it had led to isolation. His first venture, Zip2, came with its own set of challenges. Elon had been young, ambitious, and driven, but he quickly learned that being successful didn't mean that people would always like you. It didn't mean that every move would be met with applause. People would question you, doubt your abilities, and sometimes they would be just like Jack, feeling left behind, forgotten, or even betrayed. That realization settled heavily on Elon as he looked up at the man standing before him. Jack Turner wasn't some faceless villain in a business story. He was real. He had his own struggles, his own reasons for being here. And it was clear now that those struggles were what had brought him to this point. "You think I have everything," Elon said, his voice softening. "But I've had my own battles too. I've faced failure. I've lost everything more times than I care to remember." The pilot's grip on the knife faltered, just for a moment. There was something in Elon's voice, a sincerity that cut through the tension. "You've probably heard all of this before," Elon continued, leaning forward slightly, "but I've been in your shoes. I know what it's like to feel betrayed, to feel like the world is against you. But this moment won't change anything. If you attack me, it'll only make things worse. For both of us." Jack's eyes flickered with something almost like doubt. The fire in them was still there, but it seemed to be fading, slowly replaced by something else. A crack in his armor. A realization that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the way forward. But it wasn't enough to end the conflict yet. There were still walls between them, thick walls built of anger, frustration, and years of feeling overlooked. These things didn't just dissolve because Elon said a few kind words. "I don't expect you to believe me," Elon said, "but there's always a way out. There's always a way to fix things." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I can't undo what's been done to you, but I can listen, and I can help." The plane was quiet. Even the flight attendants, who had been ready to intervene at a moment's notice, held their breath. This was a moment no one could have predicted. The power of words, the power of understanding, was now the only thing that stood between disaster and resolution. Jack's hand dropped from the knife, slowly but with finality. He stood there, his body shaking with pent-up emotion, as though all the weight of his frustration had finally begun to settle in. His face softened, and the rage that had fueled his every move seemed to dissipate, if only for a fleeting moment. I don't know what to do," Jack murmured, his voice breaking. "I just wanted to make it right. To make someone feel what I've felt all these years." And with that, the air in the cabin shifted. The immediate danger had passed, but the story of what had just transpired was far from over. The silence in the cabin was palpable. It felt as though the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. The flight attendants, who had been silently preparing for a physical confrontation, now stood frozen in place, unsure of how to proceed. Elon Musk sat back in his seat, his hands resting calmly on his lap, watching the man before him with a mix of curiosity and empathy. Jack Turner, the pilot who had moments ago threatened his life, stood with his shoulders hunched, the knife now hanging limply in his hand. His face was red, his eyes welling with emotion. For a moment, it seemed like the walls of anger and bitterness that had built up in him over the years were slowly crumbling away. Elon, ever the problem solver, knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. The pilot was in pain, and pain like that didn't just vanish in a heartbeat. But there was a chance to bridge that gap, a chance to understand what had driven this man to such extremes. Elon had always believed in the power of second chances, both for the world and for individuals. Maybe this would be another one of those moments. "Hey," Elon said gently, his voice calm but firm. "Let's sit down. You and I. Together." He motioned to the empty seat across from him. "We can talk about what brought us here. I know you're angry, but I don't want this moment to define who you are. You can tell me what's been going on." The pilot didn't move at first. He stood there, frozen in his spot, struggling with the wave of emotions that had overtaken him. Jack's grip on the knife slackened further, and his eyes darted around the cabin, avoiding Elon's gaze. The reality of what had almost transpired was beginning to settle in, and the adrenaline that had once fueled his anger was now slowly draining away. "Please," Elon urged, his voice softer. "I'm here. Let's talk." It wasn't often that Elon Musk found himself in such an intimate, raw conversation. His work was always focused on technology, on innovation, on changing the world through ambition and progress. But this was something far more personal, and he knew he couldn't simply solve it with logic or spreadsheets. This was a human moment, one that required more than just ideas. It required understanding. Jack took a hesitant step forward, his eyes still averted. But then, slowly, he sank into the seat across from Elon. His posture was slumped, his face etched with exhaustion and remorse. The knife, now useless, was set gently on the table between them, a stark reminder of the tension that had nearly erupted into violence. "Why?" Elon asked, his voice quiet but insistent. "Why do you think attacking me would solve anything? What did you think you would accomplish?" Jack swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he ran them through his hair. The anger that had once burned so brightly in him seemed to flicker out, leaving only the scars of years of frustration and hardship. "It's not just you," Jack said hoarsely. "It's everything. It's the people like me, the ones who get left behind, the ones who aren't part of the big picture. You've built this empire. Tesla, SpaceX, all of it. You're a hero to some, but to people like me, you're a symbol of everything that's wrong with the world." Elon's brow furrowed, not out of judgment, but out of genuine curiosity. He had heard similar sentiments before, people who felt disconnected from the technology that was supposed to change their lives. But this was different. Jack wasn't just angry at the system. He was angry at the consequences of that system. He was angry at being forgotten. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Elon said, leaning forward slightly. "But I don't want to be a symbol of what's wrong. I want to be a part of what's right. I want to create solutions, not just for the people who can afford them, but for everyone. I want to make life better for the most vulnerable." Jack's face tightened at the mention of the vulnerable. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes narrowing slightly, but there was no malice in his gaze anymore, just a deep weariness. "You say that," Jack muttered, "but all I see are people like me losing their jobs, losing their homes, people getting replaced by machines or technology, and you're the one behind all of it. You make all these things, but no one ever stops to think about the people who can't keep up with it. What happens to them? Who's there for them?" Elon sat back, listening intently. It wasn't an easy conversation to have, but it was a necessary one. He understood the impact his companies had on the world, both the positive and the negative. But hearing it from someone like Jack, someone who felt the weight of progress in such a personal way, hit differently. "I understand," Elon said slowly. "I really do. I know the world is changing fast, and not everyone is ready for it. I've always wanted to push humanity forward, to solve problems like climate change, to make life better for everyone. But I know that doesn't always work out the way we intend." He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "That's why we have to think about the people who are affected by these changes. I've made a lot of mistakes, Jack, and I'm learning from them every day." Jack looked at him, his expression conflicted. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that hadn't been there when he first stormed up to Elon, brandishing a knife. The anger had softened into something more complicated, a blend of sorrow, frustration, and maybe even a hint of hope. You really want to fix things?" Jack asked quietly, as if testing the sincerity of Elon's words. "I do," Elon said firmly. "It's not easy, and it won't happen overnight. but I'm committed to making the world better, even for the people who feel like they've been left behind." There was a long silence between them as Jack processed Elon's words. For the first time, the tension in the cabin seemed to ease. The other passengers, who had been watching from the sidelines, now relaxed slightly, though none of them dared to interrupt the fragile moment. Jack wiped his face with his hands, as if trying to rid himself of the weight he'd been carrying for so long. His shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in release. "I'm sorry," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know who else to turn to. I thought if I made you feel what I've felt, it would make it better. But I see now that it won't." Elon gave a small nod, his face softening. "It's okay. You're not alone in this. I promise, we'll find a way to make it better. Together." And in that moment, a sense of peace settled over the plane. The storm that had raged inside Jack was slowly calming, and for the first time, there was hope that the future could be different, not just for Elon, but for everyone. The soft hum of the airplane engines gradually returned to Elon's ears as he sat across from Jack, his mind racing. The tension in the cabin had dissipated, but the weight of their conversation lingered, a quiet but profound shift that no one could ignore. Elon could feel the glances from the other passengers, some still wary, some relieved, others in a daze. The near-miss of a violent confrontation had left its mark on all of them, but now there was an unspoken understanding that something had changed in the air. The pilot who had been a threat moments before was now a man, vulnerable and conflicted, sitting with Elon Musk and sharing a moment of truth. But as Jack sat there, his posture still tense, Elon couldn't help but feel the pull of a bigger question. Was this enough? Was this simple conversation enough to fix the growing divide between technology and those who felt left behind by it? Or was this just one isolated moment, a temporary reprieve in a much larger storm? Elon knew, deep down, that this encounter was just the beginning. It was a turning point, not just for Jack, but for himself as well. This confrontation, unexpected as it had been, had forced him to confront something he hadn't fully considered before. The consequences of his innovations and how they affected real people, like Jack, who were struggling to adapt. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes meeting Elon's for the first time without anger. "I don't know what I expected to happen," he said, his voice still shaky but no longer filled with rage. "I thought if I just made you feel something, maybe it would wake people up. I thought it would make people understand." Elon's gaze softened, but he could see the deep pain in Jack's eyes. "I get it," he said gently. "You're not alone in feeling like the world's moving too fast. We're all trying to keep up, but sometimes it feels like we're falling behind." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The problem isn't just the technology. It's how we adapt to it. We've been so focused on pushing the boundaries of science, on changing the world, that we haven't always thought about the people who might get left behind in the process." Jack looked down at his hands, the ones that had once clenched so tightly around the knife. "I don't know if I can keep up," he muttered. "Everything's moving so fast, and I feel like I'm just stuck. People like me, we get overlooked. And I don't think anyone notices until it's too late." For a moment, Elon said nothing. He simply sat there, reflecting on Jack's words. This wasn't just about Jack's pain or the feeling of isolation that so many people in his position experienced. This was a larger societal issue, one that Elon couldn't ignore any longer. He had spent so much time dreaming of a future where humanity thrived on Mars, where cars ran on electricity, where space was accessible to all. But was he forgetting the very people who needed to be part of that future? Elon's thoughts were interrupted by the captain's voice coming over the intercom, announcing that the plane would begin its descent into the next city. The flight was nearing its end, and yet, the conversation he had just had with Jack felt like the beginning of something much larger. Jack turned to Elon with a weary sigh. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I made a mess of everything. I don't know if I can fix it. Can I even fix myself?" Elon paused before responding. He wasn't just thinking about the flight. He wasn't even thinking about his own life or the way forward. In that moment, his focus shifted entirely to Jack and the journey ahead for both of them. "You're not alone in this," Elon said finally, his voice firm but kind. We all have moments where we feel like we can't go on, where everything seems hopeless. But it's in those moments that we have the chance to change. You can't undo the past, but you can choose what happens next. Jack's brow furrowed as he processed Elon's words. But how? How do I start over? Elon smiled faintly, as if this was the exact question he had asked himself 1,000 times before. You start by believing that change is possible, he said, and you begin by taking small steps toward it. I've always believed that one person can make a difference, and sometimes it just takes a little courage to change the course of your life. A long pause followed as Jack absorbed the weight of Elon's advice. Slowly, he nodded. I think I understand. It's not going to be easy, but I have to try, right? Exactly, Elon agreed, his voice steady. We all have to try. Even when it feels impossible, we can find a way forward. And you don't have to do it alone. For a moment, the two men sat in silence, the noise of the cabin now a distant hum in the background. The other passengers, still cautiously observing, began to relax as they saw the tension between the two men dissipate. The crew had moved to the back of the plane, giving them space, but no one was speaking. The plane descended slowly, the lights of the city below becoming clearer as they drew closer. The world outside the windows was vast and unyielding, full of endless possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Elon felt that maybe, just maybe, those possibilities were not just about rockets or electric cars. They were about people, about understanding, empathy, and connection. The seatbelt sign pinged, signaling that they were about to land. But as the plane prepared for its final descent, it felt as though something much larger was unfolding in the lives of the two men sitting side by side. They had both been on their own journeys, each battling their own demons, but now, their paths had crossed in a way neither of them had anticipated. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Change was possible. And sometimes, it started with a conversation. The wheels of the plane hit the tarmac with a soft jolt, signaling the end of the long flight. As the aircraft slowed to a crawl, the tension that had filled the cabin was replaced by a gentle hum of everyday life, the click of seatbelts being undone, the soft murmur of voices, and the shuffling of feet as passengers stood to gather their belongings. But for Elon and Jack, the end of the flight marked the beginning of something entirely new. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, an invisible thread that connected them. The air that had once been charged with aggression and suspicion was now filled with quiet reflection, as both men silently processed the significance of their encounter. As the plane taxied to the gate, Elon sat back in his seat, staring out the window. The vast city below seemed so small from this height, the buildings like tiny specks of light against the sprawling darkness. His mind wandered to what Jack had said earlier. I thought if I made you feel something, maybe it would wake people up. The words echoed in Elon's mind as he thought about the complexities of the world he was trying to change. He had always prided himself on thinking big, on setting lofty goals, to colonize Mars, to solve climate change, to lead humanity into a new era of technology. But in that moment, he wondered if he had missed something fundamental. Jack was right. The world was changing too fast for some people to keep up, and those left behind were often forgotten. He had spent so much of his career building the future that he had neglected the people who were struggling to live in the present. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still time to change that. Jack, Elon said suddenly, breaking the silence, I know this might sound strange, but I'd like to help you. Not just with this moment, but with everything. I want to find a way to make sure people like you don't feel invisible anymore. We can build something that benefits everyone, not just the ones on top. Jack turned to look at Elon, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. The rawness of their previous conversation hung in the air between them, but now it felt like the start of something far more tangible. He had heard promises from people in power before, but there was something different about this one. Elon didn't seem like someone who would just talk. He seemed like someone who would actually try to make it happen. You mean it? Jack asked, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. You'd help me? Help people like me? Elon nodded, his expression serious. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm committed to figuring it out. The world can't just be for the privileged few. It needs to work for everyone. We can find a way to build a future where no one feels left behind. Jack sat back in his seat, the weight of the conversation sinking in. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't alone in his struggles. It wasn't just about the technology, the machines replacing human workers, or the feeling of being forgotten. It was about people seeing each other, understanding each other, and coming together to solve problems. Real problems, the kind that kept people up at night. As the plane finally came to a stop at the gate, the seatbelt sign pinged off, and the passengers began to file out of the cabin. Jack stood up, stretching his legs as he prepared to disembark, but before he could walk away, Elon stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "Hey," Elon said, his voice a little softer. "We'll figure this out, okay? I'll be in touch. Just remember, you don't have to carry this weight alone anymore." Jack gave him a small, appreciative nod. "Thanks, Elon. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I think you might be onto something." As the two men exchanged a final glance, Jack walked down the aisle and exited the plane. Elon sat there for a moment longer, processing the gravity of what had just happened. There had been a time when his vision of the future had seemed clear-cut: build, innovate, change the world. But now, there was a new layer to it, a deeper understanding of what true progress really meant. Elon's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see one of the flight attendants, a woman in her early 30s with short, dark hair and a gentle smile, walking toward him. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice respectful but tinged with curiosity. "I just wanted to thank you for how you handled that situation. You really turned things around. Not many people would have reacted the way you did." Elon gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Sometimes, you just have to talk things through, even when everything feels like it's falling apart." The flight attendant nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I've seen a lot of things in my time flying, but that was different. It's not every day you see someone who can reach someone like that, someone who was so far gone." Elon paused, thinking for a moment. "I've realized that we can't just fix things with technology. People need more than that. They need connection. They need understanding. And sometimes, they need a little bit of hope." The flight attendant smiled warmly, her eyes glistening with appreciation. "I think you're onto something, Mr. Musk. I really do." Elon stood up and nodded, grateful for her words. As he made his way down the aisle and off the plane, his mind was already racing ahead. He didn't know exactly how he was going to change things, or how this moment would ripple out into the world. But one thing was certain: he couldn't just build a future for the privileged. He needed to build it for everyone. As he walked into the airport terminal, he felt the weight of his responsibility more than ever. But it wasn't a burden. It was a call to action. And for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk felt like he was on the verge of something that truly mattered, something that could change the world in ways he had never imagined. The airport terminal bustled with the usual chaos of arriving passengers, tired travelers picking up their luggage, and the hum of conveyor belts dragging bags toward their owners. Elon's footsteps were measured, almost deliberate, as he moved through the crowd. His mind was occupied, not by the distractions around him but by the encounter with Jack, and the realization that his role in the world was evolving. This wasn't just about pushing the limits of technology anymore. It was about bridging a gap, connecting people across a divide that had been widening for years. As he passed through security and entered the airport's waiting area, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He retrieved it, scrolling through the messages, mostly updates from his teams and media inquiries. But one text stood out to him, a message from his assistant: "Elon, there's a meeting scheduled for you in an hour. It's a follow-up from your earlier conversation. You might want to be prepared. This could get interesting." He smiled wryly to himself. Interesting. It seemed to be a word that had taken on a new meaning in his life. Just this morning, he had been on a plane, fighting off a would-be attacker, and now he was facing a meeting that could change the direction of his mission, or at least, how he saw it. An hour later, Elon found himself in a quiet conference room of a high-rise building in downtown New York. The glass windows framed the bustling streets below, a stark contrast to the tranquility of the meeting room. He was the first to arrive, but soon, a few familiar faces entered. his key advisors, and some members of the team who had been following the latest developments in his company's projects. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, but also an undercurrent of uncertainty. They didn't know what had really happened on the flight, only that it had something to do with Jack, the pilot, and a surprising turn of events. As Elon sat down at the head of the table, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just another meeting. It wasn't just about product launches, business strategies, or tech advancements. There was a deeper current running through everything now, one that involved people, empathy, and purpose. One of his advisors, Sarah, a sharp-minded strategist in her late 40s, was the first to speak up. Elon, I've read the reports about what happened on the plane. I'm still not clear on how you're planning to use this incident to influence the future direction of your work. You've always been ahead of the curve, but this is different. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the edge of the table thoughtfully. I'm still processing it myself, Sarah. But the way I see it, this isn't just about the technology. It's about how we make people feel seen, understood, and included. If we're not addressing the needs of the people who are being left behind, then we're only doing half the job. There was a moment of silence as the room absorbed Elon's words. It was rare for him to speak so candidly, so openly about a more personal issue. Usually, he was all about the big vision, the future, the next great innovation. But today, he was saying something different. Are you saying that we should pivot our focus? Another team member, James, asked, his tone hesitant. You're talking about inclusivity, but that's a big shift for us. Our focus has always been on advancing space exploration, sustainable energy, AI. How do we bring that into a conversation about empathy and connection? Elon's gaze sharpened. I'm not saying we abandon our mission to reach the stars or build better, cleaner technologies, but I'm saying that we need to ask ourselves, are we leaving people behind in the process? And if we are, how do we fix that? We can't build a future that's just about us at the top. We need to build something that works for everyone. The room remained quiet for a moment as everyone processed what Elon had just said. It wasn't a simple shift. It was a recalibration of the very core values of the company. Sarah was the first to break the silence. It's not just about reaching Mars or revolutionizing electric cars. It's about creating a system where people feel connected, like they're part of something bigger than themselves. But how do we even start to change that narrative? Elon's eyes lit up with a spark of inspiration. It starts by listening to people. It starts by finding a way to bring those who feel forgotten back into the fold. We need to start conversations like the one I had with Jack. We need to understand what drives people, what they fear, and what they hope for. James nodded slowly, starting to catch the vision. So, we're talking about more than just products. We're talking about creating an ecosystem of support, an inclusive world where no one feels left behind. Exactly, Elon affirmed. We can't just create gadgets and tech solutions. We need to focus on real-world issues. People need to feel that they have a stake in the future, that they're not just passengers on this ride but active participants in shaping it. The conversation continued for the next hour, evolving into something entirely new. Elon wasn't just talking about how to incorporate new ideas into the business. He was talking about a broader, more inclusive approach to shaping the future, one that wasn't driven purely by profit, but by purpose. By the end of the meeting, the team had begun to brainstorm ideas for initiatives that would focus on bridging the gap between technological advancement and the people who might be left behind. They discussed educational programs, community outreach, and a new initiative that would encourage collaboration between tech companies, local communities, and government institutions to address pressing societal issues. As Elon left the meeting, he felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't just about changing technology, it was about changing lives. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the verge of something that could truly reshape the world. Walking back to his car, Elon's phone buzzed once again. He glanced down and saw a message from Jack. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I don't know if I'm ready to change everything just yet, but I think I might be ready to start. Thanks for listening. Elon smiled, tapping out a quick reply. You don't have to be ready for everything. Just take the first step, and I'll be here to help. As he slid into the back seat of the car, the city lights flickering outside the window, Elon felt a quiet confidence. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. The journey he was on was not just about technology. It was about humanity. And with every step, he was moving closer to a future where no one was left behind. The next few days passed in a blur for Elon. The meeting had ignited something within him that he couldn't quite shake, and every conversation, every decision, felt like it was now tethered to a greater purpose. He had always been driven by the thrill of innovation, but now, he realized, his true mission wasn't just about creating new technologies. It was about shifting the focus toward humanity, toward those who had been overlooked in the race toward the future. His teams were still in the process of internalizing the shift in direction. Some were skeptical, while others seemed energized by the idea of a greater societal mission. But Elon knew that the road ahead would be long and complicated. Changing the course of a global company and, on a broader scale, the direction of an entire industry wouldn't happen overnight. That night, Elon sat at his desk, the soft glow of his desk lamp illuminating the papers scattered in front of him. He had made a list of potential initiatives, social programs to support workers displaced by automation, partnerships with schools to promote STEM education for underserved communities, and outreach efforts aimed at providing resources to people struggling to keep up with the pace of technological progress. The weight of it all felt daunting. Every idea, every plan he wrote down, carried the possibility of failure. He couldn't help but remember Jack's words. "I thought if I made you feel something, maybe it would wake people up." Was that what he was doing now? Trying to wake the world up? The sound of his phone buzzing broke his train of thought. He picked it up and saw a message from Sarah, his strategist. "Elon, we've got a call with the government officials in the morning. They're interested in discussing our new initiatives, especially the community programs. This could be the opportunity we need to get the ball rolling." Elon rubbed his forehead, exhaustion settling in. "This is it," he muttered to himself. The first step. It was time to push forward, to show that he was serious about this new vision. The next morning, Elon stood in front of a large, sleek conference table in a government building in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with a dozen or so figures from various sectors: government officials, experts on labor markets, and representatives from nonprofits who focused on tech accessibility and workforce reintegration. Elon had taken a step back from his usual role of pitching new innovations and instead focused on a vision that, in some ways, seemed more personal than ever. The meeting began with formal introductions, but the tone quickly shifted when Elon stood up to speak. The faces around the table were used to hearing pitches about electric cars and space exploration, but today, they were about to hear something entirely different. "Elon, we're glad you're here," one of the officials, a woman named Laura, began. "I'm sure you have some exciting new tech projects to share with us today. But I understand you also have some ideas around addressing the current workforce crisis. Can you elaborate?" Elon nodded, clearing his throat. "I've spent years working on some of the most advanced technologies in the world. But as we've pushed forward with innovation, we've left behind a lot of people. There are entire communities that have been displaced by automation, workers whose jobs have been replaced by machines that they don't know how to operate. It's not just an issue of job loss. It's an issue of feeling invisible, forgotten." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "What I'm proposing today isn't just about new technologies. It's about bringing people along for the ride. If we truly want to build a better future, we need to focus on human-centered innovation. I'm talking about working with communities, offering educational opportunities, and providing a safety net for workers who need to transition to new roles. But more than that, we need to foster hope. Hope that everyone can have a role in the future we're building." The room fell silent. Laura leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "You're asking for a fundamental shift in how we approach progress. We've seen people displaced before, but you're right. We haven't done enough to help them rebuild. How do you propose we get started?" Elon took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting a three-pronged approach. First, we need to invest in education, not just for kids, but for adults too. We need to create training programs that help people learn the skills necessary for today's economy. Second, we need to provide support to those who have been impacted by automation, whether it's through direct financial assistance or programs that help them transition to new roles. And finally, we need to create new economic opportunities that can give people access to jobs that are sustainable, fulfilling, and necessary for society." The officials around the table exchanged looks. Elon could sense the hesitation in the room, the uncertainty that comes with such a significant shift. "It's a big idea," Laura said slowly, "but it might be what we need." Elon smiled. "It's not just my idea. It's the only way forward." After the meeting, Elon felt a mixture of relief and excitement. The first steps had been taken, but there was still a long way to go. As he walked out of the government building, the weight of his words settled in. He had made a commitment to Jack, to the millions of people who felt left behind, and to himself. The city stretched out before him, the streets crowded with people rushing to their destinations, each person carrying their own hopes, their own struggles. Elon couldn't help but think of the plane ride, of how a chance encounter with a pilot had set him on a path he never could have predicted. As he climbed into the back of the car, he pulled out his phone again. There was a new message from Jack. "I've been talking to people. They want to get involved. I think we're on to something here, Elon. Let's make it happen." Elon's heart quickened as he read the words. Jack was ready, and together, they were about to take the next step, not just for themselves, but for the world. It had been a week since Elon's meeting with the government officials, and the weight of the responsibility was starting to settle more firmly on his shoulders. The follow-up calls, the emails, and the press inquiries were all increasing. But what mattered most to him wasn't the headlines or the media frenzy. It was the people, the communities that would be impacted by the initiatives he was working to launch. He sat at his desk, a mug of coffee in hand, staring out at the view of the SpaceX headquarters. The sun was still low on the horizon, and the orange and purple streaks of dawn painted the sky. There was a moment of clarity in the quiet before the storm of emails and calls would flood in again. This was a pivotal time, and the next steps needed to be calculated carefully. Elon's phone buzzed on the table, breaking his reverie. It was a message from Sarah. "Elon, we've received confirmation from some of the key partners. The government wants a proposal for the first wave of initiatives by next week. We're moving fast, but the real question is, are we ready?" He stared at the screen for a moment, feeling a familiar rush of pressure. His life had always been about moving fast, whether it was with Tesla's rapid production cycles or SpaceX's mission to send humans to Mars. But this felt different. This was not just about speed. It was about substance. He typed a quick reply, "We are ready. Let's make sure we don't just push the envelope, let's change it." The next day, Elon was once again seated in a high-rise conference room. But this time, the energy was different. The room buzzed with the presence of new collaborators, representatives from educational institutions, non-profit organizations focused on workforce development, and even some private sector partners who had seen the potential in Elon's new direction. The door opened, and Sarah walked in, followed by a couple of the key members of the government team. They all took their seats around the table, with Elon sitting at the head. Sarah opened the meeting with a quick summary of where they stood. "The first phase of our plan involves working with local communities to provide access to training programs that will help individuals transition into new fields. We're also working on setting up job placement programs for workers who have lost their jobs due to automation, and we're partnering with schools to create pathways for students who want to pursue careers in technology." Elon nodded. "This is only the beginning. The real question is, how do we make sure that these programs don't just remain ideas on paper? How do we make them tangible, impactful?" The room was silent for a moment as everyone considered the magnitude of the task. One of the educational partners, a woman named Rachel, spoke up. "It's about creating a network, Elon. These programs need to be interconnected. We can't just train people in one area and leave them hanging when they need help finding work. There has to be a system in place that supports them through every step of the process." Elon leaned forward, his eyes focused intently on Rachel. "Exactly. We need to think about long-term solutions. The world is evolving rapidly, and we can't let people be left behind just because they don't have access to the resources or opportunities to adapt. We need to create a robust ecosystem that provides not just training, but continuous support." One of the government representatives, a man named Alan, interjected. "The concern, of course, is the scale. It's one thing to implement something small-scale in a few communities, but how do we expand it across the country, and potentially the world? This is a huge undertaking." Elon smiled. I've spent my career scaling up ideas. This is just another challenge. But the difference is, this time, we're scaling up something that has the power to change lives. We don't have to do it alone. We're bringing together the right partners, and we have the resources to make this work. The meeting continued for hours as they mapped out a detailed plan. Ideas flowed freely. Ideas about creating digital learning platforms, forging relationships with tech companies to offer internships, and even launching a nationwide ad campaign to raise awareness about the initiatives. But as the meeting came to a close, the true weight of the endeavor began to settle on Elon. There were so many moving parts, so many lives to be impacted, and at the heart of it all, there was the question of whether it would be enough. 2 weeks later, Elon found himself standing before a crowd at a press conference. The air felt thick with anticipation. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The public announcement of the new initiatives that would reshape the future of work. The lights flashed brightly as cameras clicked, and Elon took the stage, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. For all the success he had experienced in his life, launching rockets, revolutionizing electric cars, and making headlines, this moment felt like the most significant yet. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice calm but with a sense of purpose. "Today, we're unveiling an initiative that I believe will change the course of our future. It's no longer enough to just push forward with technology. We have to ask ourselves, who are we building for? Who gets to participate in this new world we're creating?" The crowd murmured, and Elon's voice steadied. "Today, we're announcing the launch of a multi-phase program designed to support workers impacted by automation and bring more people into the tech-driven economy. It's time to build a future that works for everyone, not just the few at the top, but for every single person who wants a chance to thrive in this rapidly changing world." There was a pause before the reporters began to shout questions. But for a moment, Elon felt a wave of quiet satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Later that evening, Elon sat in his office at SpaceX, the city lights twinkling below him. His phone buzzed, and he saw a message from Jack. "I've been following the announcement, Elon. This is the first time I've seen someone in your position do something like this. You're making a real difference." Elon smiled, typing back a quick reply. "It's not about me. It's about all of us." As he set the phone down, he looked out at the stars above. The future, once distant and cold, now felt a little bit warmer. The days following the press conference were a whirlwind. Elon had never experienced this level of attention before. Not for a technological breakthrough, not for a new product launch, but for something that, to him, felt more personal, a change in how the world viewed progress. He had expected the media to jump on the initiative, but what took him by surprise was the outpouring of support. The public's response was far more positive than he had anticipated. Social media platforms were buzzing with messages of encouragement, and even critics who had previously dismissed him as just a tech mogul were beginning to view him in a new light. But as always, with attention came scrutiny. There were still voices in the crowd questioning whether he was capable of truly following through. They questioned his intentions, accused him of using the program as a PR stunt, and speculated on whether it would have any lasting impact. But for every doubter, there was someone who believed in the possibility of change, someone who saw the bigger picture. One particular message stood out to Elon. It was a comment left on his social media post about the initiative. "I've never been a fan of you, Elon, but I have to admit, what you're doing here feels real. You're trying to fix something that's broken, and that's more than most people do." It wasn't the words themselves that struck him, but the fact that it was a voice from someone who had been a critic, someone who had seen him only through the lens of his past controversies. And yet, even they had seen the potential in what he was trying to accomplish. Elon sat back in his chair, allowing himself a moment of reflection. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path, not just because of his company's success or his wealth, but because he was making a difference in a way that mattered. The next few weeks were filled with meetings, proposals, and planning sessions. The initiative was gaining traction, but the real challenge was the execution. Elon's teams worked tirelessly, coordinating with partners in education, workforce development, and tech to launch pilot programs in various cities across the U.S. One of the first programs to roll out was a community-based training center in Detroit, a city that had suffered greatly from the loss of manufacturing jobs due to automation. The program was designed to offer free coding and tech boot camps, as well as job placement services for those who completed the courses. The goal wasn't just to offer short-term solutions. It was to create long-lasting change by equipping people with skills that would allow them to thrive in the new economy. The day the Detroit program launched, Elon found himself in the city, standing in front of a crowd of eager faces. He'd never been to Detroit before, but there was something about the city's history, the rise, the fall, and now the hope of rebirth, that spoke to him. You know, Elon began, addressing the crowd. Detroit has always been a city built on hard work, on ingenuity. It's a place where people know what it means to fight for a better life. But today, we're here to say that the fight isn't over. We're just getting started. The crowd responded with a mix of cheers and applause, and for the first time, Elon felt a deep sense of connection to the people he was speaking to. These weren't just workers or citizens. These were individuals whose lives could change with the right opportunity. Today, we're giving you the tools to build the future, Elon continued. This isn't just about learning to code or getting a job in tech. This is about taking control of your future. And together, we can make this city and the world a place where no one is left behind. As he spoke, he couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought him here. The pilot, the encounter that had set him on this path. It felt like fate, or maybe just the right moment in time. Whatever it was clear that the impact of these programs would stretch far beyond the cities they were initially launched in. Back at the SpaceX headquarters, things were starting to move even faster. The initiative was expanding beyond the U.S., with countries in Europe and Asia expressing interest in adapting the model. Elon's team worked closely with international partners, ensuring that the programs were culturally relevant and could be scaled appropriately in each region. However, with the growth came new challenges. Logistics, coordination, funding, and even local political resistance in some areas. All these factors created obstacles that Elon hadn't anticipated. But as he'd learned in his career, the bigger the challenge, the bigger the opportunity. He spent long hours in meetings with Sarah and his core team, hammering out details and tweaking the programs to fit the unique needs of each location. At one point, they encountered significant pushback from a local government official in one of the European countries. The official argued that the program would undermine existing job structures and disrupt the local economy. Elon, never one to shy away from difficult conversations, decided to take the meeting in person. He flew to the country, landing in the capital late in the evening. The next morning, he was seated across from the official in a sterile, minimalist government office. The tension in the room was palpable. Elon Musk, the official began, his tone cautious. We've reviewed your proposals, but we don't believe that what you're offering is the right solution for our country. We have strong existing industries, and your initiative, frankly, could cause disruptions. Elon leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. I understand your concerns, but I think you're looking at this the wrong way. We're not here to disrupt. We're here to build. We're offering a way to evolve. The world is changing, and we can't afford to sit back and ignore it. The sooner we start preparing our workforce for the future, the better off we'll all be. There was a long pause, and the official seemed to consider his words. Finally, he spoke again. You make a compelling argument, Elon, but how can we be sure this will work? Elon's response was simple. Because we're not doing this alone. We're bringing in experts from every field. And we're starting with people like you. Together, we can make this work, and we can prove that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of people's livelihoods. The official was quiet for a moment before nodding. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, Mr. Musk. Let's see where this goes. As Elon walked out of the meeting, he felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't a win just yet, but it was a step in the right direction. And every small victory, he knew, brought them closer to the ultimate goal. Elon sat in his office late one night, the glow of his computer screen casting long shadows across the room. The papers and reports scattered across his desk seemed endless, but it wasn't the workload that was bothering him. It was something much more troubling, a significant setback that no one had anticipated. A series of negative reports had emerged about the Detroit pilot program. The initial excitement had quickly turned into skepticism. The media had latched onto a few critical voices from local residents and workers who felt the program wasn't living up to its promises. Some complained that the training wasn't as comprehensive as advertised, while others felt that the job placement assistance was lacking. There were even a few stories about technical issues with the platform that had hindered the learning experience for participants. For the first time in months, Elon felt the sting of doubt creeping in. He'd been so focused on pushing forward, so determined to create something that would change the world, that he hadn't fully considered the nuances of execution. Now, those flaws were coming to light, and they were threatening to unravel the fragile momentum they had built. Elon called Sarah. "Sarah," he said, his voice calm but with a clear edge of frustration. "I'm seeing these reports. What happened? How did we miss this?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Sarah spoke. "We didn't miss it, Elon. We just didn't anticipate how difficult it would be to coordinate everything. We moved fast, maybe too fast. Some of the training programs fell short, and the job placements haven't been as smooth as we hoped. We're working on it, but it's going to take time." Elon leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "Time? We don't have time, Sarah. We can't afford to let this slip through the cracks. People are watching. If we don't fix this now, we'll lose everything." He paused, taking a breath. "I want a full review of the program, every single detail. We need to find the bottlenecks and address them, fast. Get the team on it." Sarah's voice softened. "I'll get on it right away, Elon. We'll make it right." The next few days were a blur. Elon threw himself into the details of the program, attending meeting after meeting with his team, trying to pinpoint exactly where things had gone wrong. It became clear that the root of the problem was a combination of factors: miscommunication between the local partners, underfunding of certain aspects of the training, and the rapid expansion of the program without sufficient infrastructure in place to support it. But there was one problem that stood out above the rest: trust. The participants in the program felt abandoned. They had been promised support, a pathway to a better future, but many of them were left without the guidance they needed. Without trust, the program couldn't succeed. People needed to believe that the initiative was there to truly help them, not just to check a box. Elon knew that rebuilding that trust would take time, but it had to start with honesty. He sent out a message to the Detroit participants, asking for a town hall meeting. The goal was simple: listen to their concerns, apologize for the shortcomings, and take responsibility. It was a bold move, but Elon knew that if they were going to make this work, they had to show their commitment. The town hall meeting took place in a modest community center on the outskirts of Detroit. Elon arrived early, surrounded by his team, and stood at the front of the room as the participants trickled in. They weren't the enthusiastic faces he had seen in the press release photos. No, these were tired, skeptical people who had been let down. Elon took a deep breath as he looked out over the room. He could see the frustration in their eyes. It was raw, real, and he knew it was his job to make things right. He stepped up to the microphone. "I know many of you are disappointed," Elon began, his voice steady but filled with genuine remorse. "When we launched this program, we made big promises. We told you that we would give you the tools to succeed, to help you build a better future. And we didn't deliver. I take full responsibility for that." He paused, scanning the room. "We didn't move as quickly or as thoughtfully as we should have. And for that, I am sorry. But I want you to know this: we are not giving up on you. We're going to fix this. We're going to do whatever it takes to make sure you get the support you need." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people nodded, while others crossed their arms in disbelief. Elon could feel the weight of their doubt pressing down on him, but he couldn't back down. "We're going to invest more resources into the training programs. We're going to increase support for job placement, and we're going to work with our partners to ensure that the curriculum meets your needs. We will be here for you, every step of the way." There was a long pause, and then one woman stood up. Her voice was sharp. "You think more training will help? What about the jobs? What about the real opportunities?" Elon nodded, acknowledging the question. "I hear you. We're working on that too. The job market is changing fast, but we're committed to partnering with local businesses to create the jobs that will put your skills to use. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen." The crowd seemed to soften just a little. They weren't convinced yet, but they were listening. After the meeting, Elon felt a sense of relief. He had done what he could to address the immediate concerns, but he knew that fixing the program was only the first step. They needed to rebuild the trust that had been fractured, and that would take time. But Elon wasn't one to back down from a challenge. He had faced far worse situations in his life, and he had always come out on top. This time would be no different. The following week saw a complete overhaul of the Detroit program. Elon and his team worked tirelessly to improve the curriculum, increase job placement efforts, and ensure that participants were supported every step of the way. Slowly but surely, the momentum began to shift. The negative press stories started to subside, replaced by more positive updates from participants who had experienced the changes firsthand. But Elon knew that the real victory wouldn't come from headlines or praise. It would come from the people in Detroit, the ones who had believed in the promise of a better future and had stuck around to see if it would come true. If they succeeded, it would prove that the initiative had been worth it. And that, Elon realized, was the ultimate test. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the Detroit program slowly regained its momentum, the impact of the initiative began to extend far beyond the city's borders. The changes in Detroit, though small at first, sparked a wave of interest from other cities facing similar challenges. There was a shift in how people viewed the idea of progress and how technology could both disrupt and rebuild. Elon watched as news outlets started picking up stories about the positive turn the Detroit program had taken. Social media feeds were now filled with success stories. Graduates from the coding boot camps landing jobs in local startups, workers finding new opportunities in emerging industries, and families slowly beginning to see a path to a brighter future. The public's faith, once shaken, was starting to be restored. Still, despite the growing optimism, there were more hurdles to overcome. Elon found himself traveling more frequently now. He'd always been busy, but now his focus had shifted entirely towards scaling the program and ensuring its success. Each city that expressed interest brought new challenges, cultural nuances, government regulations, and the question of how to tailor the program to local needs. One of the next cities he visited was Philadelphia, a city rich in history but burdened by economic struggles and a population that felt forgotten by the tech boom happening elsewhere in the country. It was a city that had seen job losses in traditional industries and was now wrestling with the fear of being left behind. The mayor of Philadelphia, Denise Hall, was a pragmatic woman with a reputation for getting things done. She had been hesitant at first to entertain the idea of an outsider, particularly one with Elon Musk's reputation, coming in and changing the landscape. But after a few phone calls and a visit to the Detroit program, she had warmed up to the idea. "I've seen what's happening in Detroit," Mayor Hall said as she sat across from Elon in her office. "And I have to admit, I'm impressed by what you've started there. But we're a different kind of city, Elon. Our people are different." Elon nodded. He had learned that lesson the hard way in Detroit. "I understand," he said. "Every city is unique. But that's the beauty of this initiative. We don't come in with a one-size-fits-all approach. We listen, we adapt, and we build something that fits the community's needs." The conversation shifted from the specifics of the program to how Philadelphia could benefit. Elon proposed setting up a training hub that would focus on industries like healthcare, renewable energy, and manufacturing, sectors with great potential for growth in the region. "I like the sound of that," Mayor Hall said, her arms crossed as she considered the proposal. "But what I need to know is whether this will work for us. Will it really create jobs that our people can access? Will the businesses here embrace it?" Elon leaned forward, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I believe in the potential of this city, and I believe that together, we can create the jobs and the infrastructure needed to move forward. It's not going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is." There was a long silence as Mayor Hall studied him, weighing his words carefully. Finally, she spoke again. "All right, let's give it a shot. But I'm going to hold you to your word, Elon. We're going to make sure that the people of Philadelphia are at the center of this." As the Philadelphia program began to take shape, the momentum continued to grow. Elon found himself back in his office at SpaceX, working late into the night, reviewing blueprints and proposals. The team was expanding rapidly, and every day brought new challenges and opportunities. But there was a sense of something bigger at play now, a feeling that the initiative was no longer just about him or his vision. It had become a movement. And with that shift in perspective came a deeper understanding of the true power of what they were building. Elon was used to solving complex problems. He had spent his career overcoming technical challenges, whether it was landing rockets or developing electric vehicles. But the issues at play now, economic disparity, workforce displacement, and social inequality, were more complicated than any engineering feat he had faced. He often found himself reflecting on the nature of progress. It wasn't just about creating the next big thing in technology or achieving another milestone. Progress, he realized, was about empowering people to take control of their own futures. It was about creating systems that didn't just benefit the few, but lifted everyone. And that required a different kind of thinking, a thinking that went beyond just innovation and embraced empathy. One evening, as he was heading home, Elon received a call from Sarah. "Hey, Elon, there's something you need to see. We just got a message from one of the Detroit graduates. It's something we didn't expect, and it might be the breakthrough we need to take the program to the next level." Elon's curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" "A graduate named James. He's one of the first group to finish the coding boot camp. He just landed a job at a major tech company in Silicon Valley. And get this, he's offering to come back and mentor new students. He wants to help us build the next generation of tech workers." Elon smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks. "That's exactly what we're trying to do, create opportunities, not just for the present, but for the future." Sarah continued, "He's even planning to bring some of his colleagues with him. He wants to give back and help others succeed, just like he did." For the first time in a long while, Elon felt a deep sense of pride. This was the real impact, the ripple effect that could change not just one city or one program, but the entire landscape of how people approached career development and the future of work. The following week, James came to the office to meet with Elon. The young man was humble but driven, and his enthusiasm was infectious. "Thank you for this opportunity," James said as he shook Elon's hand. "I don't think I would have gotten this chance without the program. Now, I want to make sure others can get the same shot." Elon nodded. "Your story is exactly why we're doing this. It's not just about giving people a job, it's about giving them a chance to change their own lives. And now you're paying it forward. That's what real progress looks like." James smiled. "I'll never forget where I came from, and I'll do whatever I can to make sure others have the same opportunity one did." As James joined the initiative, his story began to spread. The ripple effect was becoming clearer. What started as a single pilot program in Detroit was now growing into a network of individuals and communities dedicated to lifting each other up, to pushing beyond the barriers that had held them back. It was becoming a movement, a shift in how people viewed their potential, and how they could build a future that worked for everyone. And for Elon, it was a reminder that even in the face of setbacks and challenges, there was always a way forward. With the success in Detroit and the budding potential in Philadelphia, Elon's initiative was rapidly gaining traction. But the real turning point came when a well-known tech giant reached out with a proposition. It was Apple, and they weren't the only ones. Apple had long been a leader in the tech industry, and their interest in the program signified a major shift. If Apple, a company known for its own intense focus on innovation and education, saw potential in what Elon was building, the doors to broader acceptance in the tech community would swing wide open. But this was no simple endorsement. It was a partnership. The email from Tim Cook was short but powerful. "Elon, I think what you're doing is incredibly important. Let's talk." The email had arrived during a tense afternoon as Elon sat with Sarah, discussing how to expand their current resources. They were brainstorming solutions to the growing pains of the program, addressing everything from budget concerns to infrastructure needs, when Elon's phone buzzed. He opened the email, read it, and without a word, he turned the phone to Sarah. Her eyes widened as she read the words on the screen. "Tim Cook? Apple?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yeah," Elon said, running a hand through his hair. "They want to meet." The following week, Elon flew to Cupertino. It wasn't his first time at the Apple campus, but this time felt different. As he walked into the sleek, modern building, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. He wasn't just meeting with a tech company. He was meeting with a force that had shaped the very culture of innovation in Silicon Valley. Tim Cook greeted him at the door with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "I've been following your progress, Elon," Tim began. "And I have to say, what you're doing with this program is inspiring. It's exactly the kind of thing that can make a real difference in the world." Elon nodded, knowing this meeting could be a game changer. "Thank you, but I think we're only getting started. There's so much more we can do." Tim motioned for Elon to sit, and the two men settled into a plush, minimalist conference room. "So, what's the next step?" Tim asked. Elon leaned forward. "We need to scale. Fast. And we need to do it with a model that's sustainable, not just for the participants but for the businesses that we're partnering with. That's where I think Apple can really make a difference. You've built an ecosystem that's all about education, technology, and the future of work. If we can integrate what you do into our program, we can create a framework that works on a larger scale." Tim paused, considering Elon's words. "I agree. But what do you need from us? What are you asking for?" Elon's voice was clear and confident. "We need access to Apple's training platforms, your software, and most importantly, your network. If we can build these educational hubs around your tools and integrate Apple's technology into our curriculum, we can give these people the skills they need to thrive. And with your reach, we can expand this program in ways we've only dreamed of." Tim smiled, impressed by Elon's directness. "I like it. Let's talk specifics." The partnership between Elon and Apple was forged quickly and with little fanfare. The two companies, both known for their ambitious visions and willingness to take risks, saw the value in this alliance. Apple would provide access to its educational resources, everything from coding platforms to design software, while also opening doors for job placements at its retail locations and partner companies. In return, Elon's initiative would supply a steady stream of qualified, diverse talent, ready to work in the rapidly evolving tech industry. Within months, Apple's involvement began to make a tangible impact. The first set of students in the new Apple Integrated Training Program graduated with certifications from both the program and Apple itself. They were equipped not only with technical knowledge but with the soft skills that employers desperately needed, skills like collaboration, problem-solving, and leadership. The ripple effect of this partnership was massive. Companies that had previously been hesitant to invest in non-traditional job training now saw the potential of what Elon and Apple were creating. Major tech firms, including Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, began to take notice. They, too, wanted to be part of this growing movement to revolutionize education and employment. As the program expanded, Elon found himself at the center of a whirlwind. He juggled meetings with business leaders, tech companies, and government officials while still managing his other ventures. The challenges were immense, but so were the rewards. Every new partnership, every new graduate, was a reminder of why he had started this journey in the first place. But amid the growing excitement, Elon knew the work was far from done. The program was in its infancy, and it was just beginning to gain the kind of momentum that could change the future for millions of people. It wasn't just about making a difference in the lives of individual participants anymore. It was about redefining how society viewed education, work, and opportunity. It was about creating a future where access to a meaningful career was no longer dependent on your background, where every person, regardless of their circumstances, had the chance to learn, grow, and contribute. Elon had always been known for his ambition, but now, more than ever, that ambition was fueled by something deeper, a belief in the power of people, of communities, and of second chances. Months passed, and the program expanded to new cities, new states, and even new countries. The initial doubts and criticisms from Detroit had long since faded. The success stories were flooding in, one after another. Sarah, who had been there from the very beginning, pulled Elon aside one evening. "Look at these numbers, Elon," she said, showing him a report on her tablet. "We're seeing more companies partnering with us every day. And the participants, there's a real change in them. They're not just taking a course, they're taking control of their futures." Elon glanced at the data, but his focus wasn't on the numbers. It was on the faces of the people, the ones who had fought for a better future and now had a real shot at it. "This is just the beginning," Elon said quietly, his gaze focused on the horizon. "We're creating something that will outlast us." The partnership between Elon and Apple had set off a chain reaction. Cities across the U.S. and even some overseas began clamoring to replicate what had been done in Detroit and Philadelphia. What had started as an idea to help a single city had now become a nationwide and potentially global movement. Elon felt the weight of the success, but with it came new pressures, expectations, and challenges that were much harder to navigate. In the beginning, the pace had been exhilarating. Every new milestone was a victory, every new partnership a triumph. But as the program expanded, Elon felt the walls closing in. The process had grown more complex, more cities to manage, more businesses to consult, more regulations to navigate. It wasn't just the technical side of the program anymore. It was about balancing the expectations of governments, private sectors, and most importantly, the people whose lives had been changed by the initiative. One of the most challenging aspects of the program's expansion was managing the relationships with local governments. While some mayors, like Denise Hall from Philadelphia, had embraced the program with open arms, others were more skeptical. They were concerned about the rapid growth and whether the program would truly benefit their residents in the long run. Some worried that it would disrupt local economies, and a few even saw it as a threat to their own political power. Elon, usually a master of negotiation, found himself at odds with local officials more often than he'd anticipated. In one particular instance, the mayor of Cleveland, a city known for its gritty industrial past, was hesitant to jump on board with the program. Despite the success stories coming out of Detroit, Mayor John Morgan had reservations about the initiative's ability to create real, sustainable jobs. "We can't afford to gamble with our future," Mayor Morgan said bluntly when Elon met with him in his office. "I've seen too many programs that promise the world but don't deliver. I need to know what guarantees you can offer that this will work for Cleveland." Elon had expected some resistance, but still felt a sense of frustration. "I'm not offering guarantees, John. I'm offering an opportunity, a chance for your people to have access to jobs in industries that are only going to grow. And we're already seeing the results in Detroit. We're not talking about a handout. We're talking about a chance to build something real." Morgan was unimpressed. "And if it doesn't work out? What then? Who's accountable?" The tension in the room grew thick. Elon had never been one to shy away from tough questions, but this felt different. It wasn't just skepticism. It was the kind of resistance that came from fear and doubt. And worse, it was the kind of resistance that could hold back the very communities that needed this program the most. "I'm accountable," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "If we fail, it will be on me. But I'm confident we won't fail, because we're building this with the people, not for them." Despite Elon's best efforts, the conversation with Mayor Morgan ended without a clear commitment. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, a deeper connection that was needed to overcome the entrenched fear and skepticism. As the days passed, Elon's frustration grew. The resistance was not just coming from mayors and local governments. It was becoming more pronounced in the media as well. There were articles questioning the long-term sustainability of the program, casting doubt on whether it could truly scale to meet the demands of so many cities. While some hailed the initiative as a revolutionary model, others branded it as a corporate overreach. Elon spent several late nights at his desk, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop, trying to formulate a way to address the mounting criticisms. He needed to show the world that this wasn't just another flash-in-the-pan project. This was something that had the potential to change the very fabric of society. It was during one of these long nights that Sarah came into his office, a cup of coffee in hand. She could see the exhaustion on his face, the weight of everything settling on his shoulders. "You look like you need a break," she said, setting the coffee down in front of him. Elon didn't even look up. "I can't afford a break, Sarah. Too much is at stake." She sat down across from him. "I know, but maybe that's the problem. You're carrying it all on your own. And you're not the only one who believes in this vision. You've got an entire team of people behind you, and more importantly, you've got a movement of people who are counting on this program to work. So, let them help you." Elon sighed. "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like we're fighting against the tide, and every time we make progress, something else tries to pull us back." Sarah smiled softly. "It's never going to be easy, but that doesn't mean you're alone in this." The conversation with Sarah gave Elon a sense of clarity. It wasn't just about pushing forward. It was about involving everyone in the movement and making it clear that this wasn't his fight alone. He needed to reach out to the people, the graduates, the businesses, and even the skeptics, and show them the real power of this initiative. He couldn't afford to let the growing opposition derail the progress that had already been made. The next day, he scheduled a series of public speeches in cities that had been on the fence about the program. He also agreed to participate in several high-profile interviews to address the criticisms head-on. The first speech was in Chicago, a city that had long struggled with unemployment and a lack of economic opportunity. The crowd in the auditorium was a mix of hopeful young people, business leaders, and local activists. As Elon took the stage, he could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. "I know there are a lot of questions about this program," Elon began, his voice steady. "And I understand why. There's a lot at stake here. But I want to be clear about one thing. This isn't about me. This is about all of us. This is about building a future where everyone has the chance to succeed, no matter where they come from." The room was silent as he continued. "I know there will be challenges, and I know there will be setbacks. But I also know that the people in this room and the people in cities across the country are ready for change. And together, we can make that change happen." Elon's words seemed to resonate with the crowd. As he finished his speech, the applause was louder than he had expected. It wasn't just about the program anymore. It was about something larger. It was about a collective belief that they could build something better, together. The following weeks brought more speeches, more interviews, and more discussions with city leaders. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Even Mayor Morgan in Cleveland began to soften his stance, acknowledging the positive effects the program could have on his city. There were still skeptics, of course, but Elon had made a conscious decision to shift his focus from defending the program to inviting others to join the mission. And in doing so, the program began to grow, not just in size but in strength. As the program gained more traction and expanded to new cities, Elon could feel the weight of its success slowly turning into something much heavier. Expectation. The excitement and momentum were palpable, but it wasn't just about scaling anymore. There were more and more people involved, and more lives were being impacted by this initiative. The stakes were higher now, and with them came new risks. A week after the successful speech in Chicago, the first major crisis hit. Elon was finishing up a meeting when he got the call. His phone buzzed relentlessly, and when he saw the name on the screen, his stomach dropped. It was Sarah. "Hey, what's up?" he answered, trying to sound calm even though a sense of dread filled him. "Elon," Sarah's voice was tight with concern. "We've got a problem. A big one." His heart skipped a beat. "What happened?" "There's been an incident. A student from the program, one of the first to graduate, posted a video online accusing a major company, one of our partners, of discriminating against him during his internship. He's claiming that they didn't give him proper opportunities and that his efforts were belittled because of his background." Elon's mind raced. This was not what they needed right now. The integrity of the program was everything. If a scandal like this spread, it could be catastrophic. "Is this true?" Elon asked, his voice low. "We don't know yet," Sarah replied, "but we're looking into it. We've contacted the company and the student. But we need to act fast. If this gets out of hand, it could be a PR nightmare." Elon stood up, pacing around the small office. "Get all the details you can. I'll be there in an hour." By the time Elon arrived at the headquarters of the program, the situation had escalated. The video was now viral, and the social media backlash had already begun. The student in question, Alex Carter, had been part of the program in Detroit. He had graduated with high hopes and had secured an internship with one of the largest tech firms in the country, a company that had been one of the earliest to partner with the initiative. The video, which had been posted to a popular social media platform, depicted Alex in tears, speaking passionately about the treatment he received during his internship. His accusations of discrimination, subtle but harmful, were both specific and unsettling. Elon watched the video, his stomach sinking lower with every word. He had built this program with the goal of giving people like Alex a chance, people who had struggled and fought to prove their worth in an unforgiving world. But now, Alex's claims were threatening to tear down everything they had worked for. Sarah walked into the room, followed by a few members of the PR team. She met Elon's eyes with a mixture of determination and worry. The company has denied everything, but their response hasn't been convincing. The media is starting to pick up on it. Elon exhaled sharply. We can't afford to let this spiral out of control. We need to find out what happened, and fast. The investigation into the accusations was launched immediately. Sarah personally reached out to Alex, offering to meet with him and hear his side of the story. At the same time, Elon made a direct call to the CEO of the tech company involved, hoping for a candid conversation that could clear things up before the situation exploded into a full-scale scandal. I'm not saying we're perfect, the CEO, John Weaver, said on the phone, his voice tight. But this doesn't sound right, Elon. Our interns are treated with the utmost respect. I don't know what happened with this particular kid, but we'll get to the bottom of it. Elon's voice was firm. I don't care about your PR spin right now. I care about what happened to Alex. I've built a program that's about second chances and empowerment. I won't stand by and let this become a distraction. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Understood. We'll cooperate fully with the investigation. Over the next several days, the investigation dug deep. The first breakthrough came when Sarah managed to speak directly to Alex. She discovered that the situation wasn't as clear-cut as it had initially appeared. Alex had indeed faced challenges at the internship, but there were underlying issues, miscommunications, missed opportunities, and a lack of guidance from his mentors that had contributed to his frustration. It became clear that Alex's experience wasn't a case of overt discrimination, but rather a failure on the part of the company to properly integrate him into the team. The company had good intentions, but the execution was flawed. However, the damage had been done. The video was out there, and the public perception had already been shaped. Elon sat in his office late one night, reflecting on the situation. He had built the program to open doors for people like Alex, but now one of those doors had been closed, not by the system, but by the very people who were supposed to help. This wasn't just a PR issue. This was a betrayal of the trust that Alex had placed in the program and in the company, and that was something that couldn't be easily repaired. The next morning, Elon made the decision to address the situation head-on. He called an emergency press conference. Standing at the podium, Elon addressed the cameras, his expression stern but composed. "Good morning," he began. "I've seen the video posted by Alex Carter, a former participant in our program, and I've spent the last few days learning about his experience. Let me be clear. This program was created to empower people, to give them the tools they need to succeed. We built this on trust that companies would step up, trust that participants would be given real opportunities, and trust that we, as an organization, would be accountable for the outcomes." He paused for a moment, making sure his words resonated. "We have failed Alex, and for that, I take full responsibility." Elon's words were met with silence in the room. He continued, his voice unwavering. "I've spoken with Alex, and I've also spoken with the company involved. What happened to him should never have happened. We are implementing immediate changes to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Every company we partner with will be held to a higher standard of mentorship and opportunity, and we will be working directly with our graduates to make sure they are fully supported throughout their internships, ensuring that they are treated with the respect and opportunity they deserve." Elon's gaze was steady as he addressed the cameras. "We will learn from this, and we will grow. And we will continue our mission to create a world where everyone, regardless of their background, has a fair shot at success." The crisis was far from over, but Elon's willingness to take responsibility helped to stabilize the situation. The program's reputation, while shaken, remained intact. In the weeks that followed, Alex's story began to transform into a catalyst for change, not just within the program, but within the companies that were part of it. What had started as a potential disaster became an opportunity to refine the initiative and make it stronger than ever. But Elon knew that the road ahead would never be easy. He had learned an invaluable lesson. The real test of a program like this wasn't in its success, it was in how it handled failure. And failure, he realized, was just another part of the journey. The crisis with Alex Carter had shaken Elon, but it had also sparked something deeper in him, an understanding that true progress often came with bumps along the road. While the media had initially lambasted the program for its oversight, the swift action taken and the transparency Elon demonstrated helped rebuild trust. But it was clear that the public perception had shifted. What once seemed like an unstoppable movement now appeared fragile, and that fragility weighed heavily on Elon. He sat at his desk, staring at his phone as notifications from the media and social media flooded in. The apology to Alex was well received, but it wasn't enough to completely erase the stain left by the scandal. Elon had always believed in the power of second chances, not just for the participants in his program, but for himself as well. And now, more than ever, he knew that it was time to truly live up to that belief. Sarah entered the office quietly, her footsteps barely making a sound on the polished floor. Elon didn't look up immediately. He'd been poring over emails and reports all morning, trying to figure out his next move. "You okay?" Sarah asked gently, her voice laced with concern. Elon finally looked up, meeting her gaze. "I don't know, Sarah," he admitted, his voice tired. "I feel like we've lost our way a little. I built this to help people like Alex, but I've made so many mistakes along the way. It's like I can't see the bigger picture anymore." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down beside him. "I think you're just in a moment of doubt. You've been pushing this program so hard for so long, and now there's a setback. But the fact that you're here, trying to make things right, that's what matters." Elon ran a hand through his hair, the weight of it all pressing down on him. "It's not just about the program, though. It's about the people. What if we're not doing enough? What if this whole thing was just misguided?" "Don't say that," Sarah said firmly. "You've already changed so many lives. Look at all the graduates who are now thriving in jobs they never could have dreamed of. Look at the cities that are starting to come back to life. This program has made a real difference, and one setback doesn't undo that." Elon looked out the window for a long moment. "I know, but I feel like I've lost sight of why I started this. I've been so focused on scaling it, on making it work at all costs, that I haven't stopped to think about the people we're actually trying to help. I need to refocus." A week passed, and Elon took some time to reflect. He called a meeting with the core team, those who had been with him since the very beginning. It was time for a reset. As much as he hated to admit it, the program needed some recalibration, especially when it came to the relationships with the people it was designed to serve. Sitting around the conference table, Elon looked at the faces of those he trusted most. "We've been moving fast, but I think we need to slow down. There's been too much emphasis on the numbers, the cities, the graduates, the partnerships. I think we've lost sight of the personal connections that make all this worth it." There was a murmur of agreement around the table, and Sarah spoke up. "I think you're right. We've become so focused on the bigger picture that we've forgotten that it's the individuals who matter the most." Alex's story reminded us that this program is about real people, real struggles, real triumphs. Elon nodded. "Exactly. I want to hear from the graduates more directly. I want to know about their experiences. Not just the successes, but the struggles too. How can we help them more? What are we missing?" "We could set up a feedback program," suggested one of the team members. "A way for graduates to tell us what's working and what's not, and how we can make it better." Elon's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea. We need to have that constant dialogue, not just one-way communication from the top down." The feedback program was launched within a week, and the response was overwhelming. Graduates shared everything from success stories to critiques about the program structure. While many praised the opportunities they had received, others highlighted areas where they felt the program could improve. There were recurring themes: better mentorship, more personalized guidance, and a stronger network to help graduates connect with potential employers. One particular email stood out to Elon. It was from a woman named Rachel Mitchell, a graduate from Detroit who had secured a job as a data analyst at a growing tech company. In her message, she spoke not only about how the program had changed her life, but also about how she believed it could be better. Her suggestions were thoughtful, and more importantly, they resonated with Elon's growing understanding of the program's shortcomings. Rachel had written, "I was fortunate enough to find a job through this program, but what I didn't expect was how difficult the transition into the workforce would be. I was given a chance, but once I got into the job, I felt like I was just floating. There wasn't a lot of support in terms of adjusting to my new role. I wish there had been more preparation and guidance to help me succeed in the long run." That email was a wake-up call. Elon realized that giving people a chance wasn't enough. They needed to be equipped with the tools to navigate the challenges of their new lives. It wasn't just about providing opportunities. It was about ensuring those opportunities led to long-term success. Elon called Rachel to personally thank her for the email. The conversation was eye-opening. Rachel's feedback was exactly what he needed to hear, and it was clear that many other graduates had similar concerns. He realized that the next phase of the program had to focus on providing long-term support, especially as people transitioned into the workforce. The decision to refocus the program's efforts on post-graduation support marked a turning point. Elon knew that it wouldn't be easy to implement, but it felt right. The next few months were spent building out a more robust support system for graduates. Mentorship programs, career development resources, and a network that would allow people to stay connected and continue growing in their careers. As the program evolved, so did Elon's own understanding of leadership. He realized that it wasn't just about vision and ambition. It was about listening to the people around him and being willing to adapt. It was about fostering a culture of growth, not only for those benefiting from the program, but for himself as well. And in that growth, he found his renewed sense of purpose. The next few months were a period of deep reflection and action. Elon's team had become accustomed to the rapid pace of their work, but now they were slowing down, taking stock of what had been built and what still needed to be done. The new feedback program had brought to light some difficult truths, but it also illuminated a clear path forward. It was time to refocus on the essence of the program: people. Elon knew that building a foundation of trust would be critical in the coming months. Trust with the graduates, trust with the companies, and trust within the team itself. If they didn't rebuild this essential pillar, the entire vision would be in jeopardy. He sat at his desk one evening, staring at the new plan on his computer screen. His goals had shifted. No longer was it just about scaling the program to new cities and growing the numbers. It was about building lasting, meaningful relationships and creating a sustainable support system for everyone involved. The email from Rachel Mitchell still sat open in his inbox, a reminder of how far they had come and how much further they still had to go. Elon clicked on the email again, reading through it carefully, absorbing each word, as if it could unlock the key to their next big leap. He had to remember that while scaling the program was important, it was the people that were truly at the heart of everything. The first step in rebuilding trust was an all-hands team meeting. Elon knew that if the program was going to evolve, he needed everyone's input. The energy in the room was different. There was no longer a sense of tension or fear of failure, just a collective desire to learn, adapt, and move forward. "All right, everyone," Elon began, standing before the team. "We've made it through a difficult time, but we're not going to let that define us. The truth is, we have an opportunity now to really listen to the people who matter most, the people we're here to help. This program has always been about giving people a chance, but it's also about providing them with what they need to succeed in the long term. We have the chance to do it right." He paused, allowing his words to settle in. "We've heard from graduates, we've heard from companies, and now we're going to act. We're shifting our focus from just placing people into jobs to truly supporting them as they transition into their new roles. We're going to offer mentorship, career guidance, and a community that never lets go." The team was quiet for a moment. Then, one by one, the team members began to nod in agreement. "This is what it's all about," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "Giving people the tools they need to thrive, not just survive." "I'm all in." A sense of camaraderie filled the room. They had weathered the storm, and now they were ready for the next phase. It wasn't about fixing a single mistake. It was about building something better, more sustainable, and more impactful. In the weeks that followed, the program underwent a massive overhaul. They hired more mentors, individuals who had navigated their own career paths successfully and were eager to help others do the same. They created workshops and resources focused not just on job readiness, but on life readiness, managing stress, building confidence, and finding purpose in the work. Elon also made a point of personally connecting with several graduates who had faced the most challenges. He visited cities where the program had been implemented the longest, sitting down with former participants and hearing their stories firsthand. He wanted to understand where things were working and where they weren't. The closer he got to the people benefiting from the program, the more he realized how crucial it was to understand their individual needs. One particular conversation stuck with Elon. He met Maya Perez, a young woman from Los Angeles, who had graduated from the program nearly a year ago. She had landed a job in a growing tech startup but had struggled with imposter syndrome and feeling like she didn't belong. It wasn't until she had connected with one of the program's mentors that she had found the confidence to excel. "It's like no one ever told me that I could actually be good at this," Maya said as she sat across from Elon in a small cafe. "It was always about getting a job, but no one ever prepared me for what happened after that. I felt like I was just faking it." Elon listened intently, realizing that this was exactly the kind of feedback they needed to hear. "And now," he asked, "now, I feel like I have the tools to keep going. It's not just about getting the job, it's about owning it, about knowing I belong there." Elon smiled, grateful for her insight. "You belong there. And that's what we need to help everyone feel like they belong." The team worked tirelessly to build out these new initiatives, ensuring that every graduate would have access to the support they needed to not only land a job, but to thrive in it. They created a network where graduates could connect with each other, share advice, and celebrate wins, big and small. The idea was simple: to build a community of mutual support where no one felt alone. But there was still the matter of the companies that partnered with the program. Elon knew that many of them had faced their own challenges with the graduates, and while they were all eager to do better, they needed to be held accountable too. "We need to be honest with them," Elon said during a meeting with the company partners. "We've made mistakes, but we are committed to fixing them. The program isn't just about placing people in jobs, it's about long-term success. And that means that you need to be invested in these graduates too. They need mentorship and guidance, and we need to make sure you're providing it." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Many of the companies had not realized the struggles the graduates were facing after placement, and they agreed to collaborate more closely with the program, creating mentorship pathways and continuing education opportunities. As the months passed, the program slowly but surely began to rebuild its reputation. The initial panic of the Alex Carter scandal had faded, replaced by stories of success. Graduates were now thriving in jobs they had once thought were out of reach, and the support systems put in place were proving effective. Elon felt a sense of pride growing within him, but it was tempered by a quiet humility. He had learned that leadership was about more than vision and ambition. It was about listening, adapting, and continually improving. And it was about building a culture where trust wasn't just a word. It was a practice, woven into the fabric of every interaction. Sitting in his office late one evening, Elon reflected on how far the program had come. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, times when it seemed like the whole thing might fall apart. But in those moments, he had learned more than he ever could have by simply succeeding. He had learned the value of failure, the importance of resilience, and the true meaning of trust. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Elon felt confident. He wasn't just leading a program anymore. He was leading a movement built on trust, empathy, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to succeed. The program had begun to recover, but Elon knew that recovery was just the beginning. What had been built was a foundation, one that was solid and based on the lessons learned through pain, growth, and renewal. But foundations alone were not enough. If the program was going to truly make an impact on a national scale, it needed to evolve. The focus was no longer on just mending what had gone wrong. It was on pushing forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The next step would involve rallying those who had supported them and extending the same spirit of second chances to a broader community. The truth was that many people still didn't fully understand the potential of the program. They saw the success stories and the numbers, but the personal journeys, the deep transformations that were happening on an individual level, hadn't been fully showcased. Elon knew that he had to find a way to tell those stories in a way that would resonate with people, not just as statistics, but as real, human experiences. It was time to go public again. Elon sat in a conference room, surrounded by his leadership team, Sarah at his side. The room was filled with anticipation. Elon had always been a visionary, but now it was clear that he was seeing the bigger picture more clearly than ever before. This wasn't just about his vision. It was about the collective vision of everyone involved in the program. The graduates, the mentors, the partner companies, and the communities they served. It was about making real, lasting change. "Okay, team," Elon said, standing up, his eyes alight with determination. "We've spent months working on the foundation. We've listened, we've adapted, and now we're ready to take the next big step. I want us to focus on one thing: spreading the message. We need to show the world that this program isn't just about giving people jobs, it's about transforming lives." He paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "We've done the work, but now we need to tell the story. We need to highlight the people behind the program, the graduates, the companies, and the mentors. We need to show the world how much potential is out there and how our program helps unlock it." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Are you thinking of another big media push?" Elon nodded. "Yes, but this time, it's different. I want the focus to be on the impact we're having, not just on the numbers or the success stories, but on the personal transformations. I want us to feature people like Maya, people who had to fight to get to where they are. Let's make it personal." And so, the campaign began. Elon and his team worked tirelessly to curate stories, interviews, and testimonials that highlighted the heart of the program. They flew to cities where the program had the most significant impact, capturing footage of graduates who had experienced true transformation, stories of struggle, growth, and ultimate success. They interviewed mentors who had dedicated their time to helping others realize their potential, and they spoke to companies whose businesses were flourishing as a result of the program's graduates. One video featured Maya Perez, who had once doubted herself but now spoke confidently about how the program had given her the tools to not only find a job but excel in it. Her words were raw and real, and they resonated deeply with those who watched. It wasn't just about securing employment. It was about empowering people to feel like they belonged in their new roles and to build fulfilling careers. Another powerful segment featured Alex Carter, who, after the public apology from Elon, had found peace with his past. Alex talked about the importance of second chances and how the program had not only offered him a job but had changed the trajectory of his life. As the campaign launched, the response was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with conversations about the program, and traditional media outlets began to pick up on the stories of transformation. People were touched by the raw, honest stories of individuals who had overcome adversity and found success through the program. It wasn't just a recruitment drive, it was a call to action. The message was clear. Everyone deserves a chance, and with the right support, anyone can thrive. Elon's phone rang off the hook, with inquiries from companies and government organizations interested in partnering. They wanted to be part of the movement, to play a role in shaping the future of the workforce and society at large. The momentum was building, and Elon knew they were on the cusp of something truly transformative. But even as the media blitz created a wave of excitement, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something still needed to shift within the core of the program. It wasn't enough to have the right narrative. He wanted to create a lasting infrastructure, something that would outlive him and continue to make a real difference for generations to come. He gathered the leadership team together again, this time with a different tone. "The truth is, we've been getting a lot of attention, and that's great. But attention isn't the goal. The goal is sustainability. We need to create a model that isn't dependent on us. We need to empower the communities to take ownership of the program." Sarah looked thoughtful. "So, you're thinking about decentralizing the structure? Giving cities and local leaders more control over the implementation?" Elon nodded. "Exactly. We've proven that the model works, but we can't do it all ourselves. We need to build partnerships at the local level, empower them to take the program and make it their own. We need to give people the tools to lead." The conversation shifted to how the program could be decentralized, allowing local leaders to adapt it to the specific needs of their communities. This move would be crucial in ensuring the program's long-term success and its ability to continue growing organically. Elon had always been a believer in innovation at the local level. If the program could take root in cities across the country, then the collective impact would be exponential. And it wasn't just about jobs. It was about rebuilding communities from the ground up, offering hope and opportunity where it was most needed. As the weeks went by, Elon and his team began to put the framework in place for local leadership. They would train and mentor local community leaders who were passionate about making a difference. These leaders would be given the tools and resources to run the program in their own areas, but they would always have access to the broader network for support and guidance. By the end of the year, the program had grown beyond anything Elon had initially envisioned. It had become a nationwide movement, but more importantly, it had become a model for how to truly empower people, communities, and businesses alike. It wasn't about placing people in jobs. It was about creating a culture where everyone, no matter their background, had the opportunity to build a fulfilling and meaningful life. Elon sat back in his office one evening, watching the progress unfold. There was a sense of satisfaction in the air, but there was also something else, a quiet knowing. They had only just begun. With the program expanding into new cities and communities, the stakes had never been higher. Elon had always been a man who thrived in the face of uncertainty, but this new challenge was different. It was no longer about his own vision. It was about fostering a movement that could stand the test of time, even after he had moved on to new projects. As the program reached more regions, Elon felt a growing sense of pride in the work they had done. It wasn't about the accolades or the success stories that flooded in. It was about seeing people from different walks of life coming together, learning, growing, and succeeding together. This was something real, a shift in how people viewed opportunities and the systems designed to help them. Yet, as with any major undertaking, there were always obstacles lurking just beneath the surface. The decentralization of the program was a double-edged sword. While local leaders now had ownership of the program in their cities, it also meant that there was less direct control. How could they ensure that the program's values and mission were consistently upheld across the country? How could they prevent the very thing they'd been fighting against, misunderstanding, mismanagement, and exploitation, from happening again? Elon sat in a sleek conference room, surrounded by Sarah and a few other members of the senior leadership team. The conversation was intense, focused on the growing pains that came with such a large-scale expansion. "We need to implement better systems for oversight," Elon said, leaning forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "The last thing we want is for the integrity of the program to be compromised. We can't allow anything to derail the trust we've built." Sarah nodded. "We've learned so much from our earlier missteps. We can't let go of the lessons we've gained, and we definitely can't allow the progress to stall. We need to find a balance between local autonomy and the consistency that's made this program work." Elon let out a sigh, his gaze drifting out the window to the city below. "Exactly. We need to ensure that every local leader has the training and resources to implement the program effectively, but they also need to have a clear understanding of the values we've built from the ground up. It's the human element that matters most." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, workshops, and adjustments to the structure of the program. Elon, Sarah, and the team worked to develop a robust framework of training and support systems for local leaders, ensuring they would have everything they needed to thrive. The goal was clear: to build a unified vision while still allowing for regional adaptation. The team also began to implement regular check-ins with the local leaders. These would serve as both a support system and a form of accountability. As the program grew, these touchpoints would be crucial in ensuring the program didn't stray from its mission. One morning, Elon received a call that would prove to be pivotal in the program's future. It was from the CEO of a large tech company that had recently partnered with the program. "Hello, Elon. I've been following the progress of your program, and I have to say, I'm impressed," the CEO said, his voice warm yet businesslike. "You've done something extraordinary here, and I believe we could work together to take it to the next level." Elon listened carefully as the CEO laid out a proposition: a multi-million-dollar investment that would fund the next phase of the program's growth. In exchange, the company would have exclusive access to a select pool of program graduates for their workforce needs. Elon recognized the opportunity. It was a win-win for both sides. The company would gain access to a talented, diverse pool of candidates, and the program would receive the resources it needed to expand more rapidly. But there was a catch. As the conversation continued, Elon began to sense that there was more at play here than just a partnership. The CEO was pushing for a level of exclusivity that could limit the program's broader reach. The tech company wanted a significant influence on how the graduates were placed and even wanted to dictate the kinds of industries that could be prioritized. This made Elon uncomfortable. He had always believed in the program's mission of inclusivity, and he knew that if they agreed to these terms, it could limit the opportunities for graduates who didn't fit the tech industry mold. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to be upfront with you," Elon said, carefully considering his words. Our mission is about providing opportunities for all kinds of people, not just those who fit into one industry. We can't afford to narrow the scope of this program. We need it to remain open to everyone. The CEO was quiet for a moment before responding, I understand. But this is a significant investment. I don't think you realize the kind of impact we could make together. It's an opportunity you may not get again. Elon paused, his mind racing. This was a huge opportunity, but he knew it was one he couldn't compromise on. The integrity of the program is more important to me than any investment. If we take this money, it has to come with conditions that align with our values. Otherwise, it's not worth it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'll have my team get back to you with a revised proposal, the CEO finally said. The conversation left Elon with mixed feelings. He had stood firm on the values of the program, but he knew that the pressure to grow quickly would only increase. He needed to make sure that any partnerships moving forward stayed true to the original mission. After the call, Elon gathered his leadership team again. We have a decision to make. We've been given a tremendous opportunity, but we cannot let it dictate our direction. We need to stay true to our mission. If we do this right, the funding will come, but only if we never compromise on our principles. Sarah agreed. We've built something that's bigger than any one partnership. It's about the long-term impact, not just short-term growth. In the coming weeks, Elon and his team worked to secure partnerships with companies that shared the same vision. They refused to compromise on the integrity of the program, and as a result, they attracted more like-minded organizations that valued diversity and inclusivity. The expansion continued steadily, but it was clear that the true power of the program lay not in its size, but in the way it connected people to opportunities that could truly change their lives. Elon knew that no matter how big the program grew, it had to always remain focused on the heart of its mission, empowering individuals to succeed and giving them the tools and support to thrive. As he reflected on the journey thus far, Elon realized that the road ahead was still long and uncertain, but it was also filled with endless possibilities. The program was more than just a career placement tool. It was a movement that was reshaping the way people thought about opportunity, success, and second chances. And for the first time in a long while, Elon felt confident in the direction they were headed. It wasn't about being the biggest or the fastest. It was about being the most meaningful. As the program grew, so did the complexities. Elon knew that scaling a movement like this wasn't just about expanding the reach. It was about adapting, refining, and overcoming new challenges that emerged with every new partnership, every new city, and every new leader. Though they had established a solid foundation, the path ahead was far from smooth. One of the first and most pressing challenges came from the companies they partnered with. While many were eager to tap into the talent pool that the program had been fostering, there was a growing sense of impatience. Some of the companies wanted to see faster results, especially in terms of the graduates' performance and integration into the workforce. They wanted proof that the investment in the program would pay off. Elon could sense the pressure building. He had always been one to push for results, but he also knew that true transformation took time. He could feel the weight of expectations bearing down on the program and on him. What if the companies started backing out? What if the program couldn't deliver on its promises? Late one evening, Elon sat in his office, staring at the screen of his computer. He had been reviewing reports from the various cities where the program was expanding, and while the numbers were encouraging, there were certain areas that were struggling to adapt. Some cities had seen excellent results, but others were lagging behind. What was causing the inconsistency? Sarah walked into the office, a look of concern on her face. Elon, I think we need to talk about some of the feedback we've been getting. There are a few local leaders who are starting to feel overwhelmed. The pressure to deliver results quickly is getting to them. Elon leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I know. I've been feeling it too. The thing is, we can't rush this. We've built something that's meant to last, not just a quick fix. Sarah nodded. But the pressure from the companies is real. They're expecting results faster. If we don't meet those expectations, we risk losing some of the momentum we've worked so hard to build. Elon sighed. I've always believed in slow, deliberate growth. We can't sacrifice the integrity of the program just to satisfy external pressures. But I also don't want to let anyone down. Sarah took a seat across from him. Maybe it's not about going faster. Maybe it's about showing the companies what the program truly is. We focus so much on the numbers, but maybe now it's time to highlight the human impact. The stories of transformation. Elon looked up at her, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. What do you mean? Think about it, Sarah said, leaning forward. We've been so focused on showing how many people we're placing in jobs and how fast we're growing, but maybe it's time to shift the conversation. Maybe we need to show the companies the real stories, the people behind the numbers, the emotional impact. Elon's mind began to race. He had always believed that the human element was at the heart of the program, but he had been so caught up in scaling it that he had lost sight of the stories that truly mattered. Perhaps this was the key to not only strengthening the partnerships, but also ensuring that the program stayed true to its values. The next few weeks saw a shift in strategy. Instead of focusing solely on the numbers and the speed of placement, the program began to highlight the personal journeys of the graduates. They began to share the stories of individuals who had overcome significant obstacles to transform their lives. Maya, Alex, and other graduates from different cities were featured in emotional video interviews, where they shared their stories of perseverance, growth, and newfound purpose. Elon knew that this would take time to make an impact, but the shift in narrative was necessary. It wasn't about being the fastest or the most efficient. It was about being meaningful, about demonstrating the depth of the change that was happening. When the companies saw these stories, when they saw the faces of people whose lives had been radically transformed, they would understand that the program wasn't just about filling positions. It was about changing lives. It wasn't long before the response from the companies began to shift. Rather than focusing solely on speed, they started to see the true value of the program. They understood that the people they were hiring weren't just numbers. They were individuals with powerful stories, resilience, and untapped potential. The program had sparked something deeper, a movement of people working together, not just for the sake of employment, but for a larger, collective purpose. It wasn't about giving people a job. It was about giving them the chance to thrive. But even as the program found its rhythm again, new challenges emerged. One of the most difficult obstacles came in the form of a major external competitor. A large, well-funded organization launched a similar program, offering rapid job placements and focusing on high-tech industries. Their pitch was sleek, efficient, and promising fast results, and they began to draw attention away from Elon's program. For the first time, Elon felt the sting of competition in a way he hadn't anticipated. How could his program compete with an organization that had the resources to scale quickly, that promised faster outcomes and more tech-focused placements? Was it possible to keep up with such a competitor? Have you seen the latest numbers? Sarah asked as she walked into Elon's office one afternoon, holding a tablet in her hands. Our competitors are gaining traction. They've got funding. They've got the tech angle. It's starting to look like they could overtake us. Elon didn't respond immediately. His mind was working through the possibilities. He knew that they couldn't just compete on speed or tech. His program had something more. The human touch, the real transformations. But how could they make sure that people saw that? We need to double down on what makes us different, Elon said, finally speaking up. It's not about the speed. It's not about tech. It's about the long-term impact. We don't just want to place people in jobs. We want to change their lives forever. Sarah nodded. It's going to be a challenge, but we've already proven that we can make a difference in people's lives. We just need to keep telling that story. As the battle for attention grew more intense, Elon and his team focused on continuing to tell the stories of transformation, ensuring that the message of the program's deeper purpose was heard loud and clear. They also began to shift their focus back to what had made the program so successful in the first place: community support, mentorship, and the real relationships that made a difference in the lives of each graduate. They couldn't compete with a flashy new competitor on their terms, but they could stand firm on their own. A commitment to long-lasting, meaningful change that went beyond quick fixes and surface-level success. And in the end, Elon knew that would be enough. As Elon's program continued to evolve and adapt, it began to carve a unique place for itself in the world of opportunity and career placement. While the larger, more tech-focused competitors grew faster, Elon's initiative began to show that there was something much deeper at work, something that no rapid solution could replicate. It wasn't just about placing people in jobs. It was about fostering a resilient spirit within each individual, teaching them that failure didn't have to be the end of the road, and that setbacks were merely stepping stones to a better future. But this shift in perspective didn't come easily. The program, in its early years, had been all about rapid growth and success. Elon had prided himself on speed and efficiency, and for good reason. He knew that opportunity had to be seized quickly for it to be meaningful. But over time, he began to understand that success wasn't just about getting people into a job as quickly as possible. It was about empowering them with the tools they needed to thrive, no matter how many challenges they faced along the way. One of the key moments in the evolution of the program came when a group of local leaders, many of whom had faced their own struggles in the past, gathered together for a summit. This summit wasn't just about strategies or growth tactics. It was about sharing stories and experiences. Elon knew that it was time to put a spotlight on the most important lesson that had emerged through the years: resilience. The summit was held in a bright, open room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a sprawling park. A sense of excitement filled the air as leaders from all over the country took their seats, eager to connect, collaborate, and learn from one another. The atmosphere was less corporate and more communal, a reminder that the heart of the program was in the relationships, not just the results. Elon stood at the front of the room, a calm but intense presence as he began to speak. "We've been talking a lot about growth and progress," he said, his voice steady. "But I want to take a moment to talk about something that I think is just as important: resilience. This program has always been about creating opportunities, but more than that, it's about giving people the strength to face the challenges ahead, no matter what those challenges might be." He paused, letting his words settle in the room. The local leaders, many of whom had been with the program since its early days, nodded in agreement. They knew that resilience wasn't something that could be taught overnight. It was something that had to be nurtured through experience. One of the local leaders, an older woman named Martha, stood up to speak. Martha had grown up in a small, struggling community, and her personal journey had shaped the way she led the program in her city. She had once been homeless and unemployed, but through sheer determination and support from the program, she had turned her life around. "When I first started in this work, I didn't have anything but hope," Martha said, her voice cracking slightly as she remembered her early struggles. "And it wasn't easy. But I've learned that resilience isn't just about never giving up. It's about knowing when to ask for help, when to stand up again after you've fallen down, and when to keep moving forward, even when it feels like everything is against you." Her words struck a chord with everyone in the room. Martha wasn't just talking about success or achievement. She was talking about the journey, about the grit and perseverance required to stay on course when everything around you seemed uncertain. As the summit continued, other leaders shared similar stories. There was Alex, a former participant of the program who had started his career journey in a city plagued by economic downturns. He had been rejected by several employers before landing a position in a warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him the foundation he needed. Over time, Alex used the program's resources to learn new skills, and now he was running his own business, mentoring others along the way. Then there was Sarah, a single mother who had been laid off from her job in retail. She had faced the challenge of not only finding a new job, but also balancing the needs of her young children. Through the program's mentorship and job placement services, she found not just employment, but a sense of purpose and community that had been missing from her life for years. These stories weren't about achieving perfection. They were about the human experience, the struggle, and the ultimate triumph of resilience. Elon could see that the summit wasn't just a gathering of leaders. It was a celebration of everything the program had set out to accomplish: transformation, empowerment, and a shared belief in the strength of the human spirit. After the summit, Elon began to realize just how important these stories of resilience were. It was easy to focus on numbers, statistics, and success rates, but the true value of the program was in the people it touched, their struggles, their growth, and their ability to overcome. It was clear to him now that the program's value wasn't just in the outcome. It was in the process. And the process was messy, beautiful, and full of setbacks, just like life itself. Elon's reflection on the summit led him to a bold decision. The program needed a new marketing campaign, one that focused less on the numbers and more on the stories, the real, raw experiences of the people who had been through it. He wanted to show the world that the program wasn't just about job placement. It was about personal growth, community support, and resilience. The new campaign would feature real graduates sharing their personal journeys. There would be no polished success stories, just the truth, the setbacks, the failures, the moments of doubt, and the eventual triumphs. Elon knew that this approach might not be as flashy or as easily digestible as the speed-focused messaging that dominated the industry, but it was authentic, and it spoke to something deeper than just a job. It spoke to the core of human experience. Weeks passed as the new campaign was developed and rolled out. Videos of Martha, Alex, Sarah, and many others played across social media platforms. The response was overwhelming. People began to engage with the campaign not because it promised easy answers or instant success, but because it resonated with their own struggles and aspirations. The message was clear. Resilience was a value that transcended job placement. It was a value that would stay with people long after they found their place in the workforce. And as the campaign took off, Elon realized that he had found the secret to long-term success, the power of human resilience. It wasn't the fastest program or the most efficient one. It was the program that gave people the tools to bounce back from failure and to keep moving forward, no matter what. As the program gained momentum and recognition, Elon began to realize that the true test of its success wasn't how well it had performed on paper, nor how fast it had expanded. The real measure of success would be in its ability to endure through difficult times, especially when faced with unforeseen adversity. With the new narrative focusing on resilience, Elon knew that their greatest challenge was yet to come. A challenge that would truly test the heart of the program and its ability to inspire long-lasting change. It started when a major recession hit the country. Economic uncertainty swept through the workforce, and many of the companies that had been partners in the program began to scale back their hiring plans. Several large corporations pulled out of their agreements, citing the economic downturn and the uncertain future. It felt as though the rug had been pulled out from under them, leaving the program vulnerable to the very forces it had been designed to fight. Elon's first instinct was to protect the program's most vulnerable members, those who had placed their trust in it. But the reality of the situation was grim. Without the support of these big companies, the program faced a financial shortfall that could lead to layoffs and cutbacks. The thought of losing everything they had worked for was enough to bring him to the edge of despair. One evening, after hours of staring at financial projections and consulting with his team, Elon sat alone in his office, trying to come up with a plan. His mind raced as he thought of possible solutions, ways to secure new partnerships, ways to keep the program alive. But the answers weren't coming easily. As the clock ticked on, his phone rang. It was Sarah. "Elon, you've got to see this," she said urgently. "I think you need to hear what one of the graduates just shared with us. It could change everything." Elon's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" "Come down to the conference room. It's Maya." Elon stood up, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Maya had been one of the program's first success stories, a young woman who had risen from the ashes of personal hardship to become a mentor and advocate for others. Her story had become emblematic of the program's core values, and now, it seemed, she had something new to share. In the conference room, Maya stood at the front, her face a mixture of determination and hope. A small group of graduates and local leaders gathered around her, their faces focused and curious. Elon entered the room, his mind clouded with concern. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but he didn't feel ready for a hopeful speech right now. "Maya?" Elon asked, his voice softer than usual. Maya smiled, though there was an intensity to her expression. "I know it's tough right now, but I think this is the perfect time to remind everyone why we're doing this. When I came into the program, I didn't have much, just a few dreams and a lot of doubt. But you all taught me something I'll never forget: resilience. It's about surviving the storm, not waiting for it to pass." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "I want to share a story with you, one that I don't think I've ever told anyone before." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "A few years ago, I almost gave up. My family had been living in a shelter, and I was struggling to keep everything together. I didn't know where to turn or who to trust. But there was one thing I held on to. This idea that things could get better, that if I just kept moving forward, something would change. And it did. Her voice grew steadier as she continued. The program wasn't just about helping me get a job. It was about giving me the confidence to believe that I could rise above my circumstances. That belief is what carried me through the darkest times. And now, I'm standing here, not just because of what I've achieved, but because I know that there are so many others who need that same belief. We all do. Maya turned to Elon. Elon, I don't know how things are going to work out, but I know that if we stick together, if we remind ourselves of why we're here, we can weather this storm. We don't have to wait for someone else to save us. We've already started saving ourselves. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of her words filling the space. Elon could feel a surge of emotion rising within him, as though something deep inside was breaking free. There was truth in what she was saying. It wasn't about relying on the companies or external factors. It was about the strength of the community they had built and the resilience of the individuals within it. Elon looked around the room at the faces of the people who had been with the program from the beginning. Each one of them had a story, a struggle, a triumph. They weren't just recipients of a program. They were living proof of what resilience could do. "We're not going to give up," Elon said, his voice firm but full of conviction. "We've built something that can't be broken by a recession. We've built something that's about people, not just profits. And if we have to fight for that, we will." Sarah, standing by his side, nodded in agreement. "We're not just a program. We're a movement. And movements don't die when times get tough. They evolve." The decision was made. The team would not let the recession define their future. Instead, they would pivot, shifting their focus even more deeply on community engagement, finding new ways to support graduates and local leaders, and forging partnerships with smaller, more resilient companies that shared the program's values. They would also continue to highlight the real stories of transformation, showing the world that the program was about more than just job placement. It was about building a resilient workforce for the future, one person at a time. Elon knew the road ahead would be tough, but he also knew that the program had something that no downturn could take away: an unwavering belief in the power of the individual and the strength of community. They had built something real, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them head-on. And in that moment, Elon understood something vital. Resilience wasn't just about enduring the storm. It was about embracing the fact that storms would come, and they had the power to weather them together. In the weeks that followed the summit, and after the collective decision to push forward despite the economic downturn, the program began to shift. With renewed focus on community, mentorship, and resilience, they adapted quickly, finding innovative ways to engage participants and maintain strong connections with smaller, more agile companies that were still growing despite the market challenges. Elon's decision to spotlight the personal stories of transformation became a game-changer. As word spread, more and more individuals from all walks of life began reaching out for help, for guidance, and for a chance to be part of something that believed in their potential. The program, which had once been centered on sheer numbers and rapid placement, was now deeply rooted in the shared experiences of struggle and success. But even with the success of the revamped model, there remained a nagging doubt at the back of Elon's mind. It was one thing to survive a storm, but another thing entirely to know that the storm had the power to return. What would happen the next time the winds of uncertainty blew? It wasn't until a late-night call from Martha, the local leader who had been instrumental in the program's early days, that Elon realized he'd found an answer. "Elon," she said, her voice crackling through the phone, "there's something you need to know. I was sitting with some of the graduates last night, and they were talking about what this program means to them. They weren't just talking about jobs anymore. They were talking about the way it made them feel, about how they could look at their lives now and see not just a job, but a path forward, even when things weren't perfect." Elon sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The program had always been about opportunity, but hearing Martha speak about the deeper meaning, the emotional connection people had developed with the initiative, was something different. It wasn't just about getting a paycheck. It was about discovering one's purpose, even in the face of adversity. That realization sparked something in Elon. He understood now that what they had built wasn't just a response to a market need. It was a blueprint for what the future of work should look like. He called a meeting with his team the very next day. As they gathered in the conference room, Elon could see the tiredness in their eyes, but he also saw a glimmer of hope. They had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. "Team," Elon said, standing at the front, his voice steady and calm. "I think we found something bigger than just a way to place people in jobs. We found a way to create a path forward for them, a way for people to not just survive, but to thrive. This is bigger than any one of us. This is a movement, and we're not done yet." As the team nodded in agreement, there was a sense of excitement in the room that hadn't been there before. They had faced the worst, and now they were more confident than ever that they could handle whatever came next. Elon's thoughts kept circling back to Maya and what she had said during the summit. The real test of resilience wasn't just about overcoming challenges. It was about the ability to reinvent yourself, to keep evolving no matter what the world threw at you. And that was the core of what they were doing now. The following weeks were a whirlwind of new partnerships, creative collaborations, and an overwhelming response from people who wanted to be a part of this growing movement. Elon's team expanded quickly as they brought on additional mentors, experts, and community leaders who could help guide the increasing number of participants. The next phase of the program wasn't about rapid expansion. It was about cultivating long-term relationships, strengthening the foundations they had built, and ensuring that every person they reached was given not just a job, but a clear sense of purpose. And then came the biggest moment of all. A well-known philanthropist, a billionaire in his own right, reached out to Elon with an offer. He was impressed by the program's values and resilience, and after months of observing its success and impact, he wanted to invest. But this investment wasn't about just funding the program's growth. It was about funding its ability to scale in a way that stayed true to its mission. Elon was hesitant at first. He knew that outside investment could come with strings attached. But after several long discussions with his team, and after hearing countless stories of people whose lives had been transformed by the program, he made the decision to accept the investment on one condition: that they would maintain their commitment to putting people first, above all else. This investment would ensure that the program could expand even further, reaching even more communities in need. But it wasn't just about scaling. It was about ensuring that the program's core values remained intact, that the heart of it stayed grounded in the mission of empowering individuals to believe in themselves, to rise above challenges, and to keep moving forward. Months passed, and the program continued to grow, but this time, with a new level of intention. The focus wasn't on the speed of growth or the number of placements. It was on the quality of impact they had on people's lives. As new partnerships and collaborations formed, the program began to serve as a model for how businesses, communities, and individuals could come together to create lasting change. Elon sat back one day, looking out the window of his office, reflecting on how far they had come. He thought about the summit, about the graduates, and about the conversations he had with people who had once felt like they had no future. Now, they were leading their own teams, mentoring others, and paying forward the support they had received. It wasn't just about success anymore. It was about the ripple effect, the way that resilience, once fostered in one person, could spread and transform entire communities. As Elon sat there, a sense of peace washed over him. The program had grown into something he hadn't even dreamed possible when it first began. It had become a true testament to the power of resilience and the belief that no matter how dark the storm, there was always a way forward. And so, as he looked toward the future, Elon knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, there would always be setbacks. But he had learned one very important lesson. Resilience wasn't just something you taught, it was something you lived. And with that, Elon was ready for whatever came next, knowing that no matter the obstacles, the program and its participants would always rise above. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?